Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something darker than ruins and more haunting than ghost stories. Because tonight, you are a queen. Not a metaphorical one, not a brunch on Sunday one. A real, throned, dangerously powerful queen in an age where empires eat people like you alive. And I'm going to be straight with you. You probably won't survive this. Not intact. Not in the way you'd want. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and what time it is in the comments. I always wonder who's falling asleep to Roman horror at 2 AM. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel it before you hear it. The slow thunder of boots, the excited roar of the crowd, the scent of sweat and iron hanging heavy in the air. You're in the heart of Rome now, shackled, veiled and prodded forward. They call it a triumph, and technically it's not yours. It belongs to the general who crushed your army, burned your cities, and handed your name to history. You're the trophy, the highlight, the grand finale of a war Rome has already forgotten how it started. You don't walk beside your equals. You're at the end of the procession, far behind the shining soldiers and snarling war elephants, dragged between half-naked slaves and looted treasures. The chains aren't just around your wrists, they're wound into your story now. They glint in the sun, gold-plated for the crowd's enjoyment, and they rattle when you stumble, a sound the children laugh at. Some of them throw figs, others just stare. The streets are claustrophobic with bodies, Romans drunk on victory, tourists from provinces you've never even heard of, all craning to get a look at the barbarian queen, whose kingdom dared to resist. They don't see a sovereign. They see a cautionary tale with mascara streaked down her face. Up ahead, the general rides his chariot, white horses rearing like myth. A slave stands behind him, whispering in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." But nobody whispers that to you. Nobody has to. The mortality is written all over you, bruised, dishevelled, dusty from the roads of forced travel. You haven't slept well since your capture. You haven't dreamed since the night your palace burned. You pass through the forum, your sandals slapping stone that once bore the footsteps of philosophers, consuls, assassins. The parade halts for a moment in front of the Temple of Jupiter. Here it happens. A hand yanks your veil away. The crowd erupts, not in pity, but in curiosity. You are the first of your kind they've seen up close. A queen of an enemy land. They want to see your eyes. Are they mad? Are they proud? Are they broken? You try to stare straight ahead, but someone throws a handful of pebbles. One hits you just below the cheekbone. You don't flinch. That's your only revenge. You've been warned what comes next. When the triumph ends at the Capitoline Hill, the general offers sacrifice. An animal, usually. Sometimes a prisoner, sometimes a queen. There's a kind of theatre to it all. The parade is for the living, but the final scene is for the gods. It's their approval that justifies conquest. You're a character now and the script is almost over, but not quite. The consul, your captor, decides to be merciful. Not because he likes you, not because you asked, but because your broken image in chains is more useful alive. So, you're spared. For now. Not for freedom, but for symbolism. As you're led away, the crowd begins to disperse, chasing wine and shadows. A few linger to watch where you're taken. Not a prison, not exactly. A private villa, somewhere out of sight but not out of mind. You're not a prisoner. You're a warning sign left at the city's edge. Historically, Roman triumphs were rare and heavily ritualized. A general had to meet a strict set of criteria, complete a major victory, kill at least 5,000 enemies, gain territory. And the captives had to be special. Kings, generals, queens. People whose suffering elevated the general's glory. But here's the uncomfortable detail most textbooks gloss over. Many of those royal captives didn't make it out alive. After the parade, some were strangled in secret. Others simply disappeared. One fringe theory suggests that some defeated queens were forced into ritual suicide, their deaths staged as acts of dignity, but planned down to the last drop of poison. Take the case of Vercingetorix, the Gallic king who led a rebellion against Caesar. After years in prison, he was dragged out for a triumph and executed immediately after. Now imagine being a queen in his place. grander, rarer, more visible. Cleopatra famously avoided this exact fate, likely choosing death on her own terms. Or maybe not. Some modern scholars argue that the asp story was Roman invention, a neat ending to a messy problem. There's no conclusive evidence she died by snakebite. It might have been poison, or strangulation, or even staged suicide under heavy Roman pressure. The truth, buried under centuries of propaganda, may never be known. And that's the real horror, isn't it? It's not just the spectacle of punishment, it's the erasure that follows. You're famous for losing, then you're forgotten entirely. As the villa door closes behind you, and your guards settle into their corners, you realise something. Rome didn't just conquer land, it conquered memory. Your story will only survive if it serves theirs. You were once a queen, but now you're a cautionary tale in someone else's triumph. The silence in your new chamber is loud. There are no mirrors, no visitors, just you, a gilded cage, and the sound of Rome breathing outside the window, indifferent. The outfit they've picked out for you this morning is deliberate. You can tell. The fabric is sheer where it shouldn't be, and stiff where it needs to humiliate. The colour, some pale, sickly version of what your royal banners once flaunted, is meant to mock your heritage. This isn't clothing, it's costuming. And the performance isn't over just because the parade has ended. They come in pairs, silent attendants with neutral faces, always Roman, always watching. One gestures for you to lift your arms. You don't flinch when the old jewellery, the last of it, is taken. A signet ring here, an anklet there, gone. Even the delicate veil stitched with your family's emblem is carefully folded away, never to return. It'll probably end up in a temple, nailed to a wall beside the weapons your army dropped at the border. When you were queen, your wardrobe was armour. Every fold of your robe said, "I rule." Now, it's a punchline. They want you to look foreign but powerless, something between an oracle and a circus act. You try not to tremble as they cinch the belt too tightly around your middle. It's ornamental, designed to highlight your frame, not comfort you. The gold thread scratches. The sandals are the wrong size. One of the attendants offers you a mirror, but she holds it in a way that makes it hard to look yourself in the eye. You're not being dressed to receive guests. You're being dressed to be seen. There's a banquet later. A Roman senator has returned from the east and requested the company of the queen. Not your name, just your role. You'll be seated near the edge of the room, not quite in shadow, not quite in the circle of power. Everyone will pretend it's graciousness. That's the game. The feast is obscene. The table is littered with meats glazed in wine, fish stuffed with rarer fish, pomegranates bursting with seeds like little blood pearls. The Romans eat like war is a memory, and peace is their divine right. They laugh too loudly. They speak over one another. And when the general gestures for silence, they fall quiet like trained beasts. Then he introduces you. You rise. You nod. You do not bow. That small resistance earns a few chuckles and a slow clap from a senator who is clearly drunk enough to be dangerous. Someone calls out something you don't understand. Probably a joke. Probably about your crown. The general waves his hand, dismissing the moment, and you are seated again. Like a pet brought out for guests. Like a relic that breathes. The woman beside you, a wife of some equestrian family, leans in to whisper. Her perfume is strong and sweet, like overripe figs. They told us your people wear their dead like perfume. Is that true? You blink. She means embalming spices, myrrh, incense. You nod, just enough to satisfy her curiosity. She nods back as if you've confirmed a delightful rumour. She turns to the man on her other side and begins describing it like it's a fashion trend. There's a kind of ancient cruelty in the way they romanticize your pain. Rome is very good at it. To them, you are both terrifying and decorative, a mystery that has been solved and mounted. Later, you're led to a garden, a private one, hemmed with laurel trees and carved stone benches. The general follows, no guards, just him and you, and the sickly sweet scent of overwatered roses. He doesn't speak at first, just walks, hands clasped behind his back. Eventually he turns. You held the city longer than we expected, he says. Long enough to be respected, not long enough to be remembered. You don't respond. What could you say that wouldn't be used against you? They're calling you the desert flower, he adds, amused. Poets are already writing verses about your fall. I hope you take that as a compliment. You don't, but you nod. That's the performance. You've learned quickly. Historically, this part was as important to the Romans as the conquest itself. The theatre of assimilation. Public punishment was only the first act. The second was optics. A conquered queen needed to be displayed, reshaped, and rebranded into something palatable. Someone who could appear in a painting, or better, on the wall of a bathhouse. One peculiar case is that of Queen Syra of Emesa. Ever heard of her? Probably not. After she was paraded through the streets, she was given Roman citizenship and renamed. For years, she lived in Rome under the title Domina Orientis, Lady of the East. It sounds elegant, like a promotion. But records show she was assigned a tutor, that her correspondence was screened, that her public appearances were choreographed down to the tilt of her head. A puppet with a pulse. Some historians argue that this process, this elaborate public redressing and display, was Rome's way of restoring order. They weren't just defeating people, they were domesticating them, which raises a fringe theory. Were these public banquets and stylized humiliations Rome's replacement for execution? Was living under constant surveillance, stripped of identity and dignity, considered a more useful death? You wonder this as you return to your chamber. The attendants help remove your costume. You ask if you can keep the veil. They hesitate, then slowly, they shake their heads. Not allowed. You sleep poorly again. The bed is soft, but the ceiling feels close, like it's pressing down. At some point in the night, you imagine your people, not conquered, but waiting. Just beyond the Tiber, holding their breath for a sign that you're still fighting. You cry, but not for long, and never where anyone can see. In the morning there will be new clothes, a new story to play along with, another senator to entertain. But tonight, for a few stolen hours, you let yourself imagine the sand under your feet, the sharp heat of your own sun, and the silence of home unbroken. Morning doesn't come with sunlight. It comes with footsteps, soft-souled, deliberate, too light for soldiers, too early for servants. You're already awake, of course. Sleep doesn't visit like it used to. It stops by, peers in through the window and moves on. You lie still, eyes on the ceiling, counting each step as they approach. The door creaks open, and the chamberlain enters without apology. "There's news," he says, and the way he doesn't make eye contact tells you it's not good. "Of Egypt." That name used to mean gold and incense and the slow glide of barges along the Nile. Now it sounds like a tomb being unsealed. You sit up slowly. You're already dressed. Sleeping in your underrobe is a habit now. You don't want to be caught vulnerable, not even by dreams. The chamberlain continues. Queen Cleopatra has died. He doesn't say how, but you already know what he's implying. You know what story they're going to tell. They'll say she chose death. That in the final hour she took the noble route. That she tricked her captors with her famous eyes, arranged for a basket to be delivered. And then, like some tragic heroine from a Greek play, let a snake sink its teeth into her arm. It's too neat, too poetic, too Roman. Because here's the truth. Rome loves a beautiful ending. They couldn't parade Cleopatra through the streets. They feared her presence more than her army. They feared what she meant, a queen who seduced not one but two Roman leaders, a woman who ruled with intellect sharper than any blade, a goddess to her people. That kind of power doesn't get chained. It gets edited. You walk to the window. Below the garden still drips from last night's storm. You can smell wet laurel and something else, some flower you've never been able to name. Cleopatra is gone, and with her a door has closed. You're the next in line now, not for death necessarily, but for the slow smothering Rome reserves for women like you. You remember hearing the snake story as a child, not as history, but as theatre. Cleopatra, they said, could talk to cobras, that she knew their moods, that she could soothe them like pets. A fringe legend claims she even used venom recreationally, small doses to build immunity. No one knows if it's true, but in Rome, truth bends for narrative. Later that day, a letter arrives, sealed with a sigil you recognize. It's from Alexandria. Not an official communique, but a personal note, slipped past guards, tucked inside a scroll of poetry. The handwriting is shaky. It confirms what you already suspect. Cleopatra did not choose death. She was given it, quietly, in her chamber. Probably a cup of poison. Perhaps a pillow. And the snake story? A gift from Rome. A bedtime lie they can wrap in marble and myth. You sit with this knowledge like it's a stone in your lap. Heavy. Unmovable. What is worse? Being killed or being rewritten? You think about her. How she looked. How she walked. How she spoke fluent Greek, Egyptian, Latin, and several dialects of her own court. How she commanded fleets, brokered deals, outmaneuvered men who underestimated her. And now she's just a shadow with eyeliner in some Roman mural. Her face idealized, her story sterilized. In the coming days, the Senate announces an official mourning period. Not for her, of course. For Caesarion, her son, who by all accounts didn't survive much longer. He was too dangerous, too royal. The Senate praises Octavian's mercy, which sounds ridiculous coming from men who wear daggers under their togas. At a banquet that night, someone recites a poem about her. It starts with praise and ends in mockery. You smile, because you're supposed to. But inside, your ribs feel like a cage. You begin to notice things. The paintings in your quarters are changing. New frescoes added with subtle nods to Egyptian imagery, but twisted. Cleopatra reimagined not as a ruler, but as a seductress, her hips exaggerated, her features softened. A woman who danced while Rome did the real work. Propaganda disguised as art. You ask a guard, casually, who painted them. He shrugs. New commission from the consul's wife. Says she likes the exotic look. It makes your stomach turn. This, you realise, is the second death. The erasure. They'll keep Cleopatra's name, but drain it of power. They'll display her face, but dull her voice. And they'll do the same to you. Maybe not today, but soon. There's an open, scholarly debate still burning in the margins of ancient history. Did Cleopatra actually believe she could win against Rome? Some say she miscalculated, overestimated Mark Antony's loyalty, underestimated Octavian's ambition. Others argue she had no choice. Resistance was survival, even if brief. A third, quieter theory suggests she knew she'd lose but fought anyway, to preserve her image for as long as possible, to die as a queen, not a puppet. It's the last one that haunts you, because it's not about winning. It's about not letting them turn your crown into a costume. That night, you light a lamp and stare at the flame. The attendants are gone, the villa is quiet, and for the first time since your capture, you speak aloud, not to anyone, just to the air, to whatever gods still listen. Not me, you whisper. You won't turn me into a painting. It's not a promise. You don't have the power to make those anymore. But it's a line in the sand, a reminder that you were once a storm. It starts with music, not the kind you dance to in your palace, surrounded by gold and whispering servants and air thick with spice. This is Roman music, harsh pipes and martial drums, echoing down stone corridors with no rhythm for joy, only for structure. You hear it before you see the procession. Another triumph, another victory. Rome always has another victory. You're summoned to watch, not as a guest, not even as a participant this time, but as part of the scenery. There's a balcony set aside for women of royal interest. A gallery of conquered wives, sisters, queens. You arrive, veiled, like you're grieving, though what's left to grieve is unclear. You sit beside a woman draped in heavy Tyrian purple, the kind worn by Eastern royalty. She nods at you but doesn't speak. You've seen her before, in the baths, in the gardens. She walks with the quiet of someone waiting for a decision that's already been made. The drums grow louder, the ground starts to hum. And then the gates open and the procession begins. At the front, captives, soldiers, standard bearers with banners torn from temples and stitched with Roman laurels, chariots piled with spoils, ivory, gold, exotic animals. The crowd roars as a chained rhinoceros stumbles past, eyes wide and wild. Then come the generals, gleaming in armour more decorative than functional. And finally the last act, the human centerpiece, a woman, tall, proud, chained at the waist and wrists, but still walking like a monarch. Her chin is high, her eyes scanning the crowd not with fear but calculation. Her dress is ceremonial, threadbare in places, as if they wanted her to look regal and ruined all at once. You know who she is. Zenobia, Queen of Palmyra, descendant, at least by her own claim, of Cleopatra herself, scholar, strategist, ruler, and now, Rome's latest trophy. They're calling her the Eastern Lioness, as they drag her through the streets behind the Emperor's white horses. But something's wrong. You lean forward, squinting past the bright sun and dust. Her chains are gold, not iron. Her tunic, though stained, is clearly of fine make. The crowd is quieter than usual, almost respectful. That doesn't fit. This isn't how Rome parades its conquests. This feels more like a compromise, a negotiation dressed as a humiliation. You turn to the veiled woman beside you. She's watching Zenobia too. They say she surrendered herself, she says softly, voice lilting with an unfamiliar accent. Before the siege began, rode out alone. You raise an eyebrow. That's not what I heard. She smiles, just a flicker. Of course not. That's not what they want anyone to hear. And now you see it. The difference. Zenobia wasn't captured. She chose to fall. It's subtle, but it changes everything. She walks with agency. Defeated? Yes, but not broken. And that unnerves the Romans. That's why the pageantry is softer, why the chains glint like jewellery. You recall her history. She ruled Palmyra after her husband's death, expanded her empire east and west, took Egypt for a time, claimed direct descent from Cleopatra to bolster her legitimacy. Educated, fluent in multiple languages, surrounded by scholars and generals she chose herself. She was the kind of ruler Rome couldn't ignore or control, and now she walks through their streets like a living riddle. Later that night, back in your chamber, you learn more. A steward, too talkative, too young, tells you that Zenobia is not being executed, not even imprisoned. She's being relocated to a villa, with staff, a place to live out her days in quiet Roman exile. An emperor's mercy, the steward says with a shrug. Or maybe they just liked her too much to kill her. You laugh once. Not because it's funny, but because it's absurd. There's a scholarly debate that still floats around Zenobia's story like incense smoke. Did she really walk behind the chariot, or was it symbolic? Some ancient writers say she was chained and humiliated. Others say the chains were fake, a prop. There's even a fringe theory that she was never in the parade at all, but Rome added her to the records to inflate the emperor's glory. Because in Rome, power is perception. If the people see their enemy humbled, they believe the empire is unshakable. Whether it's true or not is beside the point. You wonder what Zenobia thinks as she eats her first Roman breakfast. Does she plan to escape? To write letters in secret? Or does she simply wait for the years to pass until she becomes a statue in someone's garden? You can't decide if her fate is better or worse than yours. In your dream that night, you walk through a Roman museum. Not a real one, but the kind your mind invents. Every room is filled with statues of women. Some you recognize. Some are missing their names. They all have the same expression. Distant, dignified, bored. You come to the end of the hall and see yourself, carved in white marble, draped in a dress you never wore. A plaque reads, Queen of the South, conquered, 34 BCE, honoured in defeat. You wake with sweat on your neck. They'll do this to all of you eventually. Turn you into something beautiful and hollow. It isn't until weeks later, during an early walk through the temple gardens, that you finally see what became of your throne. Not your literal one. No, that was probably melted down the night they breached the palace. But the symbol of it. The seat of your power. The woven meanings behind it. The things that made it yours. You weren't looking for it. You were following a path of marble pavers through a grove of imported fig trees when the path curved sharply and there it was. A low stone platform flanked by 2 columns, raised just enough to catch the eye, centred in a manicured courtyard. Sitting on it, in full view, was a chair. No longer a throne. A chair now. Painted, burnished, polished, but unmistakable. The back still bore the carved eagle, its wings spread wide over the crest of your former house. You know that eagle. You commissioned it yourself. It's surrounded by planters now, a scenic spot for senators to sit and discuss irrigation projects or the dull complexities of grain quotas. You step closer, the guards letting you, probably out of curiosity or boredom. You kneel, slowly, pretending to examine a crack in the base, but really your hand brushes the edge of the seat, confirming what your memory already told you. This is it. Rome has a word for this kind of object. Spolia. The spoils. Not just gold or soldiers or land, but symbols. Thrones, statues, ceremonial swords, temple doors, all repurposed and displayed. Not because they're beautiful, because they say something. They say, we beat them. We own their gods. Their kings kneel before ours. This used to be a throne, now it's furniture, and that cuts deeper than any parade. You sit near it, not on it, never on it, and watch a group of toga-clad officials laugh and gesture wildly over cups of watered wine. You hear one mention your name, mispronounced. He chuckles at a crude joke you don't catch. The others nod approvingly. No one notices the chair. You wonder what's worse, being forgotten or being remembered wrong. Later that day you begin to catalogue, quietly. You make mental notes of where the other pieces of your world have ended up. The spear you once held in ceremonial processions now hangs on the wall of a dining hall, its blade dulled and lacquered to keep from rusting. The tapestry from your private library is draped behind a bust of some dead Roman official. One of your statues, stripped of its identifying inscription, stands near the garden pool, now said to be some Eastern goddess. They call it tribute. You call it grave robbing. This practice of spolia wasn't random, it was calculated. Rome didn't just take, it reassigned meaning. The goddess Isis, for example, was imported, reshaped, and folded into Roman religion. Temples sprang up across the empire, but her image was changed, softened, Latinized, stripped of its more dangerous implications. Her mystery cults, once feared, were tolerated so long as they didn't challenge Roman authority, and now you see it happening to your legacy. But here's a fringe detail few people talk about. Some of these pieces weren't just decorative, they were believed to hold power. It's said that in the Temple of Mars altar, Augustus placed the armour of Crassus, taken after his defeat in Parthia, as a kind of spiritual trophy to balance the scales, a charm of vengeance and closure. Other temples displayed relics of defeated kings, believing them to draw divine favour. Even thrones, some believed, carried the aura of rulership. So when they sit in your chair, they're not just lounging, they're stealing your memory 1 hour at a time. You remember vividly the day you were crowned. The incense thick in the air, the chants in the old tongue, the way the throne's wooden seat had still been warm from the sun. You remember how heavy the crown was, and how it left a dull ache in your temples long after it was removed. You remember that you never sat easily. You always held yourself upright, taught to rule from the spine up. There was dignity in that ache. Now there's just dust. A debate still smoulders in certain academic corners. Was Rome's use of spolia purely psychological, or was there a genuine belief in the transferred power of these items? Some argue it was magic disguised as policy. Others say it was political theatre, nothing more. But if you've lived it, you know. There's a reason they didn't just destroy your throne. They wanted to possess it, like a wolf dragging home a kill. That evening you're called to the atrium for a private viewing. A visiting dignitary from Africa wishes to see the Queen. You arrive as requested, robes ironed flat, veiled in soft linen. He bows, respectfully. A foreigner, not Roman, not yet. The conversation is polite, and then he asks, "Is it true you once ruled from a golden chair?" You pause. There's only one correct answer. "No," you say. "It was made of cedar, gold cracks in the sun." He seems satisfied. The Roman official beside him chuckles and adds, "It now graces our gardens." Of course it does. After they leave, you sneak out again, back to the garden. You wait until no one's watching and sit near your throne, still not on it, just beside it, fingers ghosting over the carved eagle. You close your eyes. In the darkness behind your eyelids, the world is hot and dry again, the sky wide and blue as a soldier's banner. You're back in the Great Hall, incense rising, people chanting your name in your own language. You sit, not on this chair, but on the one it used to be. The one they can't touch. The one made of memory. You hold on to that as long as you can. They call it mercy. It comes wrapped in silk words, served with fresh figs and honeyed wine, and offered with the same open palm that once swung the sword. Mercy, they say, is why you're alive. Mercy is why you're housed in a villa instead of a cell, dressed in fine wool instead of sackcloth, allowed to bathe and walk and breathe fresh air. Mercy, they remind you, is a Roman virtue. The highest one, perhaps. You hear the word often enough that it starts to rattle in your skull like a loose coin. But let's not pretend. You weren't spared because of mercy. You were spared because dead queens are just bodies, but living queens are symbols. You're not here because they forgive you. You're here because you're useful. You're here to be seen. Living, breathing proof that Rome can break kingdoms without breaking a sweat. You walk their gardens like a tame lioness, powerful and pitiful all at once. They bring schoolchildren to see you sometimes. Not officially, of course. You're not part of the tour. But now and then a tutor will nod toward your balcony and whisper, "That's her, the queen who once ruled the southern deserts." The children peer up, eyes wide, unsure whether to wave or shiver. You give them nothing. No smile, no gesture, just a cold stare through the veil. You want them to remember you as strange and unknowable. The guards are polite, distant. One of them, a young man with a fresh scar along his cheek, starts bringing you books. Scrolls mostly, Virgil, Hesiod, Livy, all Roman of course. One day he slips you something older, a cracked tablet with faint fading symbols. Your language, not a scroll, not copied by Roman hands. The real thing, smuggled from your homeland, perhaps stolen from a burned library. He doesn't explain, just sets it down and says, "This one's hard to read. I thought maybe you'd understand it." You do, and it guts you. It's a story, a prayer actually, one of the old ones, the kind you were raised on, a hymn to the moon goddess of your people, asking her to guide the queen's footsteps through the darkness. You used to recite it before battle. Now you trace the lines with your fingers like they're scars. So this is the mercy. You get to exist in a shadow of your own story. You're not allowed to send letters, but somehow the scroll finds its way back into circulation, copied and rewritten in shaky Latin by someone eager to add it to their personal collection. Soon, a version of your moon hymn appears in a new Roman text, a guide to Eastern superstitions. The Queen's voice, now part of a sidebar about desert cults and feminine mysticism. You want to scream, but you don't. That would be impolite. That wouldn't be merciful. There's a historical record, fragmented, vague, that speaks of a queen like you. Her name is never given. She's referred to only as Regina Captiva, the captive queen. She lived in a villa just outside Rome and was often seen walking at dawn, veiled, alone. She's mentioned in a letter between senators debating whether to relocate her to the countryside for better optics. One claims she is docile and ornamentally tragic. Another notes that her presence has become a philosophical inconvenience. They don't write about her death. She simply vanishes from the records. Here's a quirky little thing most people don't know. Some captured royals were given roles in rituals. Not official ones, not sacred, but pageants, theatre. During festivals reenacting Rome's great victories, they dress up actors as defeated kings and queens. Sometimes, when they were feeling especially theatrical, they'd use the real thing. You heard once, just a whisper through the walls, of a queen forced to play herself on a stage built to look like the battlefield where she lost. It's not clear if it was punishment or spectacle, maybe both. You ask your guard one day, half as a joke if they're going to make you act in a play. He frowns. "They did that once," he says, "but the crowd didn't like it, said it felt off." You laugh. Of course it felt off. What's more unnerving than seeing your enemy alive, speaking, reminding everyone that this wasn't a story, it was a war? But Rome loves a story more than it loves the truth. That night, the general who captured you sends a gift, a necklace, pearls strung tight on gold wire. He includes a note, to remind you that even the strongest chains can be beautiful. You stare at it for a long time, then you toss it into the brazier. The next day he sends another necklace, this time silver, lighter. No note. The message is clear. You can burn one gift. You cannot burn the system. There's a Roman term, clementia. It means mercy, sure, but not quite. It's closer to grace under power, the mercy of the strong, the kind that reminds the weak they've been allowed to live. It was a favourite word of Julius Caesar, especially after crushing a rebellion. He'd grant clemency with a generous smile, then watch as the grateful survivors grovelled in the ashes of their former lives. That's what you live under now, clementia. You should be thankful. You should perform gratitude like a second skin. But every day you wake up and imagine how different it could have been. If you'd chosen the blade, or the poison, or simply to ride out into the desert and vanish into legend, you could have been mystery. You could have been a question mark. Instead, you're a footnote with good posture. This, Rome tells itself, is mercy. A living trophy. A reminder that power does not need to destroy. It can preserve just long enough to prove how completely it has won. But you know better. This isn't mercy, it's curation. And you've become the museum piece. You hear her name for the first time in months, not from a scholar or a soldier or even one of the whispering servants, but from the old woman who tends the herb garden near your chamber. She's stooped, nearly blind, always smells like thyme, and never says more than 3 words. But today she looks up from a pot of bruised mint and says, as if commenting on the weather, "They burned Boudicca's grove." You don't react right away, not outwardly. You kneel beside her, pluck at a few weeds, nod like you've just heard something about a neighbour's dog. But inside, something flares. You haven't heard that name in so long that it hits you like cold water. Boudica, Queen of the Iceni, scourge of Roman Britain, flame-haired, wild-eyed, if the stories are to be believed, a woman who burned 3 Roman cities to the ground in revenge for her people, her daughters, and her pride. You've always wondered what really happened to her. Rome certainly doesn't like to say. The official records are, let's say, suspiciously clean. They write about the rebellion, the fires, the casualties. They tally the legions lost and the civilians slaughtered. And then, nothing. No trial, no triumph, no parade through the forum. Just a vague line. The enemy queen vanished after her final defeat. It is presumed she took her own life. Presumed. A favourite Roman word full of holes and smugness. You used to imagine her being captured, made into a warning like you. But now you think maybe Boudica did something harder. Maybe she slipped through the net entirely, fought her last battle and rode off into legend. Or into death. Or into both. The fringe theories are delicious. Some say she poisoned herself with hemlock in a sacred grove, standing barefoot on moss. Others claim she made it north, joined with the Picts, and lived out her life as a nameless warrior queen. A few even whisper that she was captured and held secretly, too volatile to parade, too valuable to kill. But those stories have no ending, just smoke. The more likely truth is this. Boudica died in the chaos, and Rome made sure she stayed dead. Not just physically, historically. No statue, no trial, no public execution to risk martyrdom, just quiet erasure. And that, in its own way, is the most Roman punishment of all. Still she lingers. You hear her name again at a dinner party, spoken by a senator's wife who says it with a scoff. Barbarian Queen, she calls her, swirling wine in her cup. They say she dressed like a man and painted her skin with ash. How terribly theatrical. You keep your face neutral, but your spine tenses. The old myths always paint powerful women with a certain brush. Too masculine, too emotional, too wild. Boudica wasn't a general. She was hysterical. Cleopatra wasn't strategic. She was seductive. Zenobia wasn't ambitious. She was arrogant. You were probably ungrateful. The funny thing is, these Roman women, they think they're different. Safe. They talk about you and Boudica and all the others like you're from another world. As if you didn't once sit at a council of war. As if you weren't raised on strategy, on statecraft, on the pulse of an empire. They think of queens as costumes, not systems. But you've seen Boudica's ghost. Not in some dream. Not in the mist of a temple. but in the faces of women who dare to speak plainly in the wrong room. You saw it in Zenobia, chin lifted behind her golden chains. You see it in yourself, when you meet your own eyes in polished bronze. Later that week, you find a fragment of something tucked behind a loose stone in the garden wall. A scrap of parchment, faded, torn, clumsily hidden. It's a verse written in rough Latin with poor spelling. It reads, "She rose with fire, and we fell into it. She is ash. We are dust. But she burned first." You don't know who wrote it. A scribe? A soldier? Someone who survived the smoke? But it's about her, Boudica. No name, but the fire is there. You hide the parchment in your sleeve. It smells faintly of smoke and age. You press it flat under your pillow like a relic. It stays with you, that verse. You mutter it to yourself on your walks, in the bath, before you sleep. It becomes a kind of ward, a reminder that not all resistance ends in marble. Some ends in memory, unclaimed and dangerous. There's a debate, of course, among scholars. Was Boudica a queen in the formal sense, or simply a leader born of rage? Some argue she had no political legitimacy, only vengeance. Others claim she was crowned in the wake of her husband's death, her power blessed by tribal rites. A few say she was never meant to rule at all, that Rome's treatment of her daughters forced her hand. But history doesn't care much about nuance. Rome certainly didn't. She rebelled, she burned cities, she embarrassed them, so they erased her. But not quite. You know better than most that stories are hard to kill, and perhaps that's why they never paraded her. Perhaps they feared that even in chains she'd ignite something, the way a dying coal can still light a pyre, the way a woman standing tall, even while beaten, can become more than a body. She can become a spark. That night you sit beneath a fig tree and say her name aloud for the first time. Boudica. The word feels dry in your mouth, like dust, or smoke, or something sacred. You wonder what name they'll forget you by. It happens without a whisper, no fanfare, no shouted orders or clattering hooves, just a change in your schedule one day. The meal arrives earlier, the guards at your door switch shifts without their usual idle chatter, and a new woman, silent and thick-wristed, replaces your usual handmaid. You're not told anything. You're not supposed to ask. But you've been watching Rome long enough to know when something is about to disappear. And this time, it's not a statue or a throne. It's a queen. Not you. Her. You knew her only as Callis, which wasn't her real name. None of the women here use real names. You each wear borrowed ones like ill-fitting cloaks. But Callis, tall, quiet, from somewhere beyond the Black Sea, had been here for nearly as long as you. You spoke once in the gardens, just long enough to realize you shared a former life. She'd ruled a wet, forested land whose name the Romans couldn't pronounce, and whose gods they found unsettling. Her rebellion was brief, crushed before it ripened. She arrived in Rome pale with grief and never seemed to quite warm up. Now she's gone. You ask the new handmaid where she went. She shrugs. Transferred. The word feels cold in your ear. Sterile. Clean. Like wiping a chalkboard. Transferred to where? The countryside? A temple? A tomb? No one tells you. This is how it goes. After the triumphs end and the city forgets the names, the captives begin to vanish. A slow unspooling. Quiet removals one by one. First the ones who caused trouble. The ones who refused to learn Latin, who shouted at senators during feasts, who threw their food at the walls. Then the ones who simply stopped eating, stopped speaking, stopped being photogenic. They disappear into rooms and are not seen again. You begin to keep a mental list, not of names, those are long gone, but of faces. The woman with the sharp jaw who used to pace the colonnade at dawn. The dark-eyed one who always sat on the right at banquets, careful never to drink. The former priestess who once told you her god would punish them all, and then choked on a pomegranate seed the next morning. Each one a missing tile in a mosaic you're trying desperately to finish. And you know your turn will come. Not soon, maybe, but eventually. The Romans are patient, efficient. They don't rush their erasures. They let you soften first. Fade. It's more elegant that way. You hear whispers, late at night when the villa is still and the guards are dozing, that some of the disappeared queens were married off to aging senators, as gestures of goodwill. Others were sent to monasteries, though you know Rome doesn't truly have monasteries yet, just early versions of retirement homes for inconvenient women. One rumour suggests that a queen from the islands was sent to a villa on a cliff, watched by deaf servants, and allowed to garden but never speak. That's a Roman favourite. Captivity disguised as peace. Some get sent to temples, not to worship, no, don't be naive, but to serve. To kneel in the corner while Roman women ask Venus for sons and fortune. The queens become part of the decor, symbols of what happens when you reach too high. There's a particularly disturbing fringe theory you once heard from a visiting scholar, half drunk on imported date wine, that Rome kept certain royal women intact for sacred roles, not as priestesses, as vessels, living altars. No proof, of course, no records. But the way he said it, with that little smirk, made your skin crawl. You wake in the middle of the night to silence so heavy it feels physical, and for a moment you think your time has come. You swing your legs over the bed, heart hammering, listening for movement. But there's only the distant splash of a fountain, the sound of Rome breathing in its sleep. In the morning your chamber is exactly as it was. The same slippers placed neatly at the foot of your bed. The same fruit, peeled and laid out in a bowl. A scroll left by your guard. Now the only one who speaks to you like you're still a person. You ask him directly, just once. What happened to Callis? He looks at you for a long time. Then he says, "She left Rome." You nod, so that's how they'll phrase it. Left. In your old kingdom, when a royal woman was exiled or executed, there were rituals, songs, grieving periods. The people would wear certain colours, speak her name aloud during festivals, even set a place for her at meals during mourning. Here, the forgetting is surgical. There's no shadow, no echo, just a clean break. There's a line in a Roman legal tablet about the fate of enemy captives. Qui devictate sunt, memoria donatai. Roughly, those who are conquered are gifted to memory. Sounds poetic, doesn't it? But the truth is, memory here is a vault with a one-way door. Once you're gifted to it, you don't return. That day, your dinner is brought earlier. 2 guards stand by the door instead of 1. They don't speak. You sit and eat slowly, deliberately, chewing each olive until the pit clicks gently against your teeth. You will not fade. You will not go quietly. That night, you write her name down. Not Callis. Her real name. You scratch it onto the bottom of the wine vessel with a bone hairpin, over and over, until it carves into the clay. You don't know if anyone will ever find it. That's not the point. You just need it to exist. Because here's the cruel paradox. Rome's obsession with spectacle means your absence becomes more dangerous than your presence. Once they forget you, once they erase you, they lose control of your story. That's what they fear the most. Not rebellion, not even revenge. They fear myth. And you're getting very good at becoming one. It starts, as these things often do, with a name. A new one you didn't choose, dropped into your lap like a stray coin. It comes from a senator during a feast, drunk and chuckling, sloshing wine as he waves his cup toward you. "Ah, our little Julia Orientalis." He says it with pride, like he's naming a ship or a racehorse. And the others laugh. You force a smile. You don't correct him. Because you know what this means. Rome has begun to adopt you. Not officially. You're not being handed citizenship or a villa in the hills. No one's giving you a place in the Senate, gods forbid. But this is how it begins. The slow creeping process of transformation. They rename you, rebrand you, fold you into their world like a new marble tile in a crumbling mosaic. A few days later, you're summoned to a new chamber, larger, with better light. And new robes are waiting, plainer than what you're used to, but unmistakably Roman in cut. Your guard, the only one who still treats you like you're real, stands in the doorway and watches. "What is this?" you ask. "Honour," he says. "Integration. You're being given status." The word curdles in your stomach. Integration. You know what it really means. Erasure in slow motion. You're escorted to a room you've never seen, where an older woman with pinched lips and ink-stained fingers waits. She introduces herself as Livia. No title, just the name. She's here to teach you how to move through Roman society, as if you haven't already learned, as if surviving the endless cycle of banquets and whispered mockery hasn't been the greatest education of your life. Still, you nod, sit, listen. Livia tells you that you'll be expected to attend public events soon, to offer a blessing at a festival, to smile at the right people, wear the right colours, praise the right gods, and, of course, go by your new name, Julia, a good Roman name, noble, historic, reassuring. You want to spit. You ask her casually how many other queens she's helped rebrand. Oh, not many, she says, flipping through a scroll. Most don't last long enough. You're one of the lucky ones. Lucky. The next few weeks become a blur of rehearsals. You're shown how to stand, how to speak in measured Latin, how to use the correct hand gestures when addressing the crowd. They drape you in jewellery that doesn't belong to you and call it diplomacy. You're told not to mention your gods, not to refer to your homeland, not to speak unless spoken to. All for harmony. This isn't assimilation, it's conversion. A fringe theory among modern historians suggests that Rome believed it was doing conquered rulers a favour by adopting them. That the process wasn't purely strategic, it was philosophical. They truly thought Roman identity was superior, and that allowing a foreign queen to become Roman was an act of grace, like offering a prisoner a golden cage instead of a grave. But the debate goes deeper. Some scholars argue that these rebranded queens weren't just symbolic. They were used to bridge cultural gaps in newly conquered territories, shown off in the provinces as proof that Rome could be merciful, inclusive, benevolent. Your face might appear on coins, yes, but with a new name, a new hairstyle, a new god, you become a billboard. One day, they take you to a forum during a minor festival. Not a grand affair, just the sort of event where city officials hand out bread and make long speeches about civic virtue. You stand behind a marble railing, veiled but visible, like a saint or a statue. The crowd murmurs when they see you. Some clap. One child waves. An orator speaks at length about Rome's strength and mercy, about the value of unity, about the honoured guests from distant lands. That's your cue. You step forward, say your line, something about peace and prosperity. The crowd claps politely. You return to the villa and vomit into a basin. After that, the requests increase. Appearances here, endorsements there. They start calling you nobilissima femina, a noble woman of Rome. It sounds impressive. It means nothing. You're not invited to vote. You're not invited to speak. You're a vase with a pulse. There's a moment, just one, that catches you off guard. A Roman girl, maybe 15, finds you in the garden. She's wide-eyed, trembling slightly and too afraid to speak. She just stares. You nod, gentle. Yes? I read your story, she whispers. In a play. They said you were cruel. That you sacrificed children to the sun. You blink. What? She stammers. That's what the actor said. But I don't think it's true. I think they lie about you. Like they lied about Queen Dido. You crouch beside her, holding her gaze. And softly you say, what you read was not my story. That was theirs. She looks like she might cry. You want to tell her everything, but you don't. You touch her hand briefly, then she runs. And just like that, you understand something terrifying. The transformation is working. The new narrative is seeping into the stones, the scripts, the schoolchildren. Rome is not erasing you violently. It's doing something far more effective. It's rewriting you. Your language is banned from your own tongue. Your gods reduced to curiosities. Your face painted in the style of Roman frescoes, with features softened and rounded until it barely looks like you at all. You hear your new name more than your real one. You start to forget what your voice used to sound like when you commanded an army. Some days you practice it in secret. Whisper to yourself the battle cries, the prayers, the laws, just to remember. You're still here, for now. But they are trying, piece by piece, to make sure when you die, there will be no one left to mourn you, only the statue they built in your place. They bring your son to you in the middle of the day, under an olive tree in the villa's shaded courtyard, as if it's just another polite meeting between guests. You weren't told he'd arrived. There were no trumpets, no heralds, not even a whispered warning from your guard. One moment you're alone, tracing the petals of a wilting chrysanthemum. The next, there he is, smaller than you remember. Older too, standing awkwardly between two Roman tutors in grey robes. He doesn't run to you. He bows. You want to weep at that. How thoroughly they've trained him. You rise slowly, your knees trembling with something that is not joy. He doesn't speak until one of the tutors nods. Then he recites a greeting, stilted and formal in Latin. His voice is unfamiliar, deeper, slower. It catches in the middle like he's not sure if he's allowed to speak freely. You take his face in your hands. You whisper his name. His real name, not the Roman name they've given him. He flinches at it. Not in fear, but in confusion. As if it's a sound from a dream he can't quite place. They tell you he's being educated in the tradition of Rome, that it is an honour for a foreign prince to study under Roman tutors. Rhetoric, mathematics, philosophy, statecraft. He knows more about Cicero now than about his own grandfather. They show you a list of his readings, as if that's proof of their kindness. You're meant to be grateful. But what you see is this. They've turned your son into a future governor. Not a king, not a rebel, a bureaucrat. You're allowed to walk with him. Supervised, of course. The guards keep a respectful distance, but they're listening. You talk about safe things, the weather, the fruit trees, the birds overhead. He names each one in Latin and offers their Greek equivalents too, like a clever little diplomat. You ask what stories he likes best. He says the tale of Romulus and Remus. You bite the inside of your cheek so hard you taste blood. That night, alone, you hold the robe he wore when he was still yours. Tiny, stained with saffron. You press it to your face and try to remember the last time he spoke your language fluently. You can't. The Roman method was never just about conquest through war. It was conquest through time. They didn't simply defeat their enemies, they absorbed them. And children were the easiest entry points. A conquered people might resist an occupying force, but they'd melt when their sons came home speaking Latin, dressed in togas, quoting Roman virtues. It happened in Gaul, in Numidia, in Parthia. It's happening now, in your own bloodline. There's a debate among historians. Was this education a kindness or a curse? Some argue that Roman schooling gave foreign children a chance at real power, that it spared them war and turned them into leaders who could protect their people from within the system. Others say it was brainwashing, pure and precise, designed to erase native culture one boy at a time. You don't need to argue, you live it. Your son writes his letters now with a Roman hand, signs them with a Roman name. They still let him mention you, but only as Mater Orientalis, his Eastern mother, never his queen. They've decrowned you even in his mind. One of the tutors, a slick-haired man with a serpent smile, pulls you aside one afternoon. He says, he's doing well, sharp mind. They're considering placing him in the household of a senator next year. Perhaps even a military track he could do very well. You nod, smile, pretend that this is what you wanted. But that night you write a letter. Not for him to read now, he's too far gone for that. This is for the future. You scratch it into a wax tablet, cover it, hide it behind the bricks in your room. In it you remind him who he was, who you were, the names the world once knew you by, the language of your birth, the God who blessed his cradle, the war you fought for his right to be. You don't know if he'll ever find it, but it's a resistance, however small, a memory smuggled into time. There's a strange story you once heard, maybe apocryphal, maybe true, about a queen in Thrace whose children were taken as hostages. She carved their family history into the walls of a cave, deep in the earth, using fire ash and bone. It was never meant to be found. It was just a last breath of identity. Centuries later it was discovered by shepherds, half erased, but enough remained to prove she'd once ruled, that her story hadn't been entirely stolen. Sometimes survival isn't about staying alive, it's about planting something that might grow when you're gone. When your son visits again, he speaks more freely, tells you about the games, the baths, the feasts. He's making friends. One of them is the nephew of a tribune. He says this like it matters. You ask him gently what he remembers about home. He frowns. Home? You nod. The palace, the scent of the spice market, the horses on the hill. His face twitches. For a second, something flickers in his eyes. Then it fades. That was a long time ago. You nod again. Smile. You don't cry. Not in front of him. He walks away when the bell sounds. Doesn't look back. You wonder, watching him disappear behind marble columns, whether he'll ever forgive you. For surviving. For letting them take him. For not dying as a legend so he could remember you as something brighter than a caged shadow. But you did what queens do. You endured, even as they turn your son into a Roman. There are whispers now, low murmurs floating through the corridors like incense smoke that refuses to rise. You hear them at the edge of conversations, in the pauses between servants' greetings, during the shuffle of scrolls in the library where you're now permitted to sit in silence. The word most often used is collaborator, not in accusation, in curiosity. They're talking about you. You've smiled at enough feasts, offered enough blessings at enough ceremonies, worn enough Roman silk that they're beginning to wonder. Not if you've accepted your fate, but whether you're now a part of it. There's a senator, one of the younger ones, who refers to you as the Whispering Queen. Another calls you Rome's favourite ornament. You'd laugh if it didn't ache. And then comes the offer. It's not formal, that's not how these things work. It comes during a private supper with the governor's wife, who has grown uncomfortably fond of you. She sips her wine and says, with the calm of someone discussing weather, "We have need of someone like you, someone with perspective and a light touch." She glances at you over her cup. Someone who understands how to speak to the more reluctant parts of the empire. You don't answer right away. She doesn't press. But the next day, a sealed scroll arrives with a list of names and a request for your insight. Not commands, not demands, a request. You laugh, soft and bitter. They've finally realised you're more valuable alive and useful. They want you to become a liaison. Not officially, of course, your role won't carry a title. But behind closed doors, you're to offer guidance on cultural matters, to translate, advise, interpret gestures, offer opinions on how best to pacify certain provinces, where to build temples, which sacred festivals to tolerate, what punishments would cause the least unrest. In short, they want you to be their voice in the minds of the people they've crushed. You stare at the scroll a long time before deciding, because you know what this is. It's not trust, it's utility. You're no longer just a symbol. They're grooming you into a tool, and part of you considers it. Not for ambition, not for favour, but for access. If they let you inside the system, you might be able to do more than just survive it, maybe even subvert it in small, quiet ways, so you accept. At first, it's mundane. You're asked whether a conquered tribe would be more insulted by an altar's placement on a hill or in a valley. You're given symbols from other regions to identify. You're asked to interpret dreams by some senator's wife convinced she's being haunted by foreign gods. But over time, the questions sharpen. They begin to ask you about leaders, names of potential threats. Which ones are charismatic? Which ones have armies? Which ones pray too loudly? You lie. Strategically. You inflate the importance of the safe ones. You downplay the dangerous ones. You steer their attention toward men who have no interest in rebellion, and away from those who burn for hit. You leave names off lists. You subtly change dates. Nothing obvious, just enough to misdirect. It's dangerous work. If you're discovered, they won't parade you through the streets again. You'll vanish like the others, one more ghost in a city of shadows. But you do it anyway, because this is your rebellion now. There's a historical theory, rare, disputed, that suggests some conquered queens acted as double agents, that they served Rome on the surface but worked in secret to undermine it. One such woman is only referred to in scattered inscriptions, Domina Duplex, the double lady. It's unclear who she was. Some say she was Iberian, others insist she was Gallic. But records link her to a sudden string of supply shortages and political miscommunications in at least 3 provinces. Then she disappears, just gone, no trial, no mention in triumphs. You wonder if they found her tablet, if they burned it, or if, like you, she tucked it somewhere only time could find. Your guard notices the shift in you, the slight change in posture, the way your eyes flick to maps for a beat too long. "You're doing something," he says one evening. "Something dangerous," you shrug. "Aren't we all?" He doesn't report you, not yet. You learn things too. Who's truly in power, which generals are stretched thin, which governors are soft, which temples are ripe for scandal. You collect these facts and hide them away like stolen gems, not to use today, but for when you need them. You begin to write again, carefully, code hidden in prayers, allegory disguised as poetry. One scroll praises the goddess Minerva for protecting the silent wolf among sheep. Another includes an invented myth about a caged phoenix that refuses to burn. You start leaving them in public places, Temples, bathhouses, tucked behind statues. Just stories. Just harmless little tales. But you hope someone reads them and understands. It's a long game, a quiet war. No armies, no swords. Just you, your mind, and the machine of the Empire grinding slowly around you. And maybe that's the part Rome never understood. Queens don't stop ruling when their thrones are taken. They adapt. They infiltrate. They survive. They bring the marriage proposal as if it's a gift. It arrives on crisp parchment, sealed with blue wax and carried in by a young man with breath that smells faintly of ink and ambition. He bows low, says your Roman name, Julia now, always Julia, and places the scroll in your lap like it's something sacred. The note is short, formal. It lists the titles of the man in question, his family's prestige, his connections to 3 consuls and 1 priestess. It mentions his land holdings, his age, his kindness, his tolerance for foreign wives. You sit there and stare at it for a full minute before you laugh. Not the polite kind, the real kind, the hollow one that slips out when the absurdity curdles in your throat. The young messenger looks confused, but you wave him off. Thank him, you say flatly, for his generous consideration. You don't need to ask if this is optional. Of course it's not. The governor's wife visits the next day, smiling too broadly, cheeks flushed with fake excitement. She speaks of duty, of honour, of transitioning into Roman society. She says, "You've done so well, and this would be the final step in your transformation. It would show that you belong here." That word again, belong. You ask about the man. She says he's older, yes, but respectable. A widower. He owns a villa in the hills and has no sons, no heirs. He's looking for companionship. And you? Well, you're still very beautiful. You press your lips into a line. Queens don't scream, not where they can be heard. There's a long, long history of Roman men marrying foreign royalty. They call it diplomacy. What it is, most of the time, is domestication. You remove the crown, put her in a nice villa and make her a wife. Not a political prisoner, just a woman who married well. Her bloodline becomes Roman. Her children speak Latin. Her legacy dies quietly in a garden with a good view. And here's the cruel part. Sometimes it works. There's a fringe theory about a Dacian queen who married a Roman governor after her kingdom fell. She took his name, bore him 2 children, and disappeared from history. But 2 generations later, one of her grandsons rose to the Senate, a full citizen, wealthy, influential. Some say she planned it that way. Others say she had no choice. Maybe both can be true. You're given time to consider, but not much. Your guard watches you more closely now, not in suspicion, just in anticipation. Like he's waiting for your answer too. He doesn't speak of the marriage, but he begins to address you with more formality. He says lady instead of you. He stands straighter, as if you're becoming respectable. You remember, too clearly, the way marriages used to be arranged in your kingdom. Carefully, tactically, always for strength. A prince of the hill tribes to secure the passes, a cousin of the spice merchants to stabilize trade. You never considered marrying for love. But even back then, marriage was something you chose. Now it's a leash. That night, you sit in the bathhouse and let the steam blur the world. The water smells of herbs you can't name. You watch the other women, Roman wives and visiting matrons, chatting, gossiping, relaxing. They talk about hair oils, about children, about which statue in the forum is the most handsomely carved. One turns to you. "Are you the Eastern one?" You nod. She smiles, vaguely wistful. "I used to pretend I was you when I was a girl. Before your hair went grey, of course." You say nothing. Later, alone, you study your reflection in the surface of the pool. You're older now, not ruined, not worn, just sharpened, weathered like stone. Would marriage kill what's left of you, or just bury it beneath another name? You think of the future, of being someone's quiet wife, of dinner parties where you nod at the right jokes, of perhaps raising another child, this time Roman from birth. The idea makes your stomach twist. But then again, what if marriage gave you more freedom than captivity? You'd be out of this villa, you'd have your own rooms, your own servants, maybe even a library. Rome loves its respectable matrons. If you become one of them, you might vanish into their blind spot. And from there, who knows what you could do? You could write again. You could teach. You could find others like you. The proposal, you realise, is both a trap and a key. And that's how Rome operates. Not with shackles anymore, with velvet. You visit the senator who offered himself. He receives you in a sun-drenched atrium surrounded by potted laurels. He's older, yes, but not cruel. He speaks gently, and when he says your Roman name, he says it as though he's reciting something sacred. "I don't want to change you," he says. You don't believe him, but you appreciate the performance. He offers you a ring, not on a knee, not with flowers, just with a nod. A contract. You nod in return. You don't accept. Not yet. Back at the villa, you write a name into the dust on your windowsill. Not yours, your mother's. The one who taught you to ride horses and recite lineage back 7 generations. The one who said, "A queen is still a queen if she holds her tongue like a dagger." You smile. They want a Roman wife? Maybe you'll give them one, but she'll be carved from iron beneath the veil. And Rome won't know she's still ruling. It's a quiet wedding. No parade, no temple choir, no foreign dignitaries, not even a full complement of Roman senators pretending to be impressed. Just you, the aging patrician they've paired you with, and a few polite witnesses in one of his family's country villas, nestled between lazy hills and wild thyme. It's beautiful in the way all exile tends to be, scenic, still, and steeped in forgetfulness. You wear cream-coloured wool, simple but fine, not a crown, not even a necklace. The officiant recites the rites with the bland efficiency of someone reciting a legal contract, and that's what this is, isn't it? A contract. Between you and survival. Between Rome and the last shred of your story. You sign your name in Latin, with a hand that trembles only slightly. You don't say your real name, not aloud, but you whisper it in your mind, every syllable thick with dust and memory. Just to remind yourself it still lives. Afterward there's a small feast, nothing extravagant. The wine is decent, the olives are sharp, the figs bruised but sweet. You sit beside your new husband, Quintus Aurelius something something. He's fine, truly. He doesn't try to impress you, which is almost a kindness. He doesn't leer. He doesn't try to break you open like a puzzle. He just eats, occasionally, glancing your way like he's surprised you're real. "This estate will be yours to manage," he says, between bites of roasted pigeon. "I don't mind country life. Less noise." You nod. So he's not a fool. He knows this is an arrangement. You've both been placed here to keep you away from the real game boards, but that suits you. Quiet is useful. It doesn't mean powerless. The next morning you wake to silence. Real silence. No marching feet. No servant chatter. Just bird song and the occasional creak of cypress trees stretching under the wind. You stand on the villa's balcony, barefoot, wrapped in a wool shawl, and look out at your new kingdom. Fields, orchards, a vineyard trailing down the hill like a green ribbon, a throne in exile. There's something peaceful about it in a cruel kind of way. You're not chained, you're not paraded, you're forgotten, and maybe that's the most dangerous position of all, because it gives you room to move. The estate becomes your world. You learn the names of the servants and, more importantly, the names of their children. You walk the grounds every day at dawn, not because you're sentimental, because it gives you access. You speak to the labourers, the shepherds, the scribes. You learn where the grain is stored, who pays the taxes, what caravans pass through town. You listen, always listening. And slowly you begin to build something, not a rebellion, not yet, just a network. People underestimate widowed women in the countryside. They're background characters in Rome's story, meant to host feasts, manage estates, birth children if they're young enough. But you're something else entirely. You're a former queen with nothing left to lose and too much memory to sit still. You begin writing again. Letters, notes, verses hidden in the margins of merchant ledgers. You have access to scribes now, thanks to your husband's generous household accounts. You dictate carefully, cloak meanings in poetry, use old names only those from your homeland would recognise. Messages are sent with wine shipments, scrolls tucked in the lining of amphorae. It's also Roman, and that's the beauty of it. You're using their system against them. There's a historical figure, barely a footnote, named Fulvia of Cappadocia. A queen exiled to a Roman villa in Gaul, who later reappeared in court records linked to uprisings along the Danube. The records are sparse. Some say she was executed quietly. Others claim she vanished, possibly returned east. But the best theory? She never left. She simply adapted, used her Roman marriage as a cloak and funneled information until the empire started bleeding at the seams. You like that story. You hope it's true. Your husband leaves often. That helps. He visits Rome for senatorial sessions, though he rarely speaks during them. He's one of those men who enjoys power as a concept but has no taste for its sharp edges. You don't mind. He sends gifts. He writes you dull, affectionate letters. He's a good man who will never understand you, and that is his most useful quality. The villa staff begins to trust you. You treat them with respect. You speak to them in their own dialects when you can. You remember birthdays. You mourn with them when their mothers die. One night, a steward brings you a scroll from a traveller, someone who remembers your father's court. You don't open it right away. You hold it to your chest for hours. It feels like holding fire. Inside is a list of names, disguised as poetry, each one someone who is still loyal to your line, scattered, hidden, but not gone. You begin to dream again, not of war, not yet, but of return, of rising, not like a fire, but like a tide. There's a fringe belief common in your homeland that exile is not a punishment, but a transformation, that God sent queens into the wilderness not to shame them, but to prepare them, that the greatest rulers are not born in courts, but in silence, in loss, in waiting. You cling to that. And in the quiet of your borrowed villa, with a Roman silk on your shoulders and foreign soil under your feet, you sit not as a wife, but as something older, something patient, and very much alive. There's a statue of you now, not that they say it's you. Of course not. That would be too direct, too impolite for Roman sensibilities. No, this is a symbolic representation, a marble figure installed in the villa's inner courtyard, unveiled during one of your husband's more performative homecomings. It stands tall and dignified, draped in layers of fabric that cling artfully to hips and shoulders, one arm raised in some vague gesture of wisdom or blessing. The sculptor has taken liberties, of course. The nose is sharper, the mouth smaller, the hair arranged in neat Roman waves instead of the proud braids you once wore in battle. You stare at it for a long time. It does not look like you. It looks like the idea of you filtered through someone else's myth. "What do you think?" your husband asks, puffed with pride, like he's just given you a child or a temple. You tell him it's beautiful. You don't tell him that your stomach twists when you look at it, because you know what this really is. It's not a tribute. It's a taming. They've turned you into a goddess, not one to be worshipped, but one to be contained. You, immortalized in stone, eyes cast upward like you've surrendered to a higher power, namely Rome. This is the part where your legacy gets carved. There's a pattern here if you watch closely. Rome doesn't just defeat its enemies, it repackages them. They've been doing it for centuries. They took the Carthaginian goddess Tanit and called her Dea Celestis. They turned Egyptian Isis into a fashionable cult stripped of her original thunder. Even enemy leaders are reimagined. Vercingetorix the rebel becomes Vercingetorix the noble savage. Mithridates the poison king becomes a cautionary tale. Every threat gets flattened, softened, recast in marble with just enough dignity to be palatable, and none of the edge that made them dangerous in the first place. Now it's your turn. They're starting to write about you. Not you as you are. You as you've been reshaped. You find a scroll in your husband's study, an early draft of a historical account. It refers to you as the modest Eastern consort, a woman of great poise and virtue, whose foreign beauty was matched only by her willingness to accept Roman customs. You nearly laugh yourself sick. Modest, willing, accepting. They've taken your silence for consent. They always do. Later you hear that the statue's image has been copied, replicated for the atrium of a bathhouse in Rome. Not as you, of course, but as a personification. Pax Orientalis, the peace of the East. A figure meant to reassure Roman citizens that the wild lands beyond the sea have been calmed, civilized, chained. The sculptor even added a little Roman eagle tucked into the folds of the gown. Charming. There's a debate among modern scholars about this particular trend. How Rome so effectively absorbed the imagery of the conquered. One camp says it was political brilliance. a soft power strategy, making the foreign familiar. Others argue it was spiritual theft, stripping meaning from sacred symbols and using them like wallpaper. A more radical theory posits that Rome didn't see it as theft at all, that they believed they were elevating the foreign by Romanizing it. You know better. You remember what your own temples looked like, the cold stillness before the rituals began, the scent of burning myrrh curling into the rafters, the way the priestesses moved in silence, barefoot and straight-backed, eyes painted not for beauty but for meaning. You remember the statues there, carved by hands that knew you, that carved your gods with reverence and not revision. Now you sit beside your own likeness and feel like a ghost. One day, a Roman girl visits with her mother. She stares at the statue for a long time before turning to you. Is she real? You pause, then nod. Yes, she was. The girl frowns. What did she do? You lean down, looking her in the eyes. She tried to save something. The mother laughs lightly and ushers her away. Later that evening you scratch a mark into the base of the statue. A small one, invisible unless you know where to look. It's your name, not the Roman one, the real one, pressed into the stone like a whisper in a hurricane. You do not pray to the gods of Rome, not anymore, but you leave offerings anyway, small tokens placed beneath the statue when no one is watching, a sprig of rosemary, a few grains of salt, a drop of your own blood, not because you believe the statue has power, but because you need something to carry the weight of your memory. You begin keeping a record, secretly, a hidden chronicle, not in Latin, but in your own tongue, tucked between pages of legal documents and recipe scrolls. You write the true version, not the marble version, the one with teeth. You describe your fall, your chains, your rage. You write the names of the others who vanished. You write of Cleopatra, of Boudica, of Zenobia, of the nameless queens who walked beside you in silence. You write of Callis. You write of your son. You write so that if anyone ever dares to dig through the ruins, they will find something raw. Not a statue, a scream. The first time you see yourself in a mosaic, you nearly choke on a piece of pomegranate. It's in a guest house, some coastal estate your husband insists on visiting during the hot season, where the sea breeze makes his aging knees ache slightly less. The place is full of art, as most Roman villas are, every surface crammed with declarations of wealth and taste. Painted ceilings, imported tiles, statues with smug mouths. You expect the usual: Bacchus with a wine jug, Mars with a spear, Venus lounging in a scallop shell. But there you are, not named, not labelled, just there. A woman in foreign robes, sitting on a throne made of ivory and pearls, her skin pale but sun-warmed, her eyes cast downward as though contemplating something ancient and sad. Beside her is a lion, not a roaring beast, but a curled, passive creature, resting at her feet like a well-fed hound. Her hands are folded. She is serene, majestic, and nothing like you. A child runs past and points at it. That's the Peace Queen, he says. She tamed the lion with her mind. You sit very still. Your husband doesn't notice the resemblance. Or maybe he does and chooses not to say. It's not the kind of thing you discuss openly, not anymore. But it's happening. You feel it, deep in the pit of your stomach, that creeping transition. You've become imagery, not biography, not history, design. It spreads quickly. A few months later, you hear about a new mural in the baths of Ostia, featuring a queen robed in starlight, holding the hand of Aroma herself. They're calling it Harmony from the East, and you know it's you. The pose, the jewellery, the way the artist captured your hair, your pre-approved Roman version of it, of course. You realise they've begun to treat your image the same way they treated your throne. Looted, polished, and set in place as decor. But here's the trick. They don't call it you, not directly. They never do, because naming you would acknowledge you. And Rome doesn't acknowledge, it absorbs. You wonder sometimes if Cleopatra would have hated this or laughed. She was always so aware of her image. She made herself myth while she was still breathing. You didn't have that luxury. You were too busy trying not to die. But now you've been turned into a symbol anyway. A version of you, calm, wise, conquered, exists in bathhouses, atriums, and libraries, everywhere but in truth. And the women, Roman women, They love you. They copy the drape of your robes, the tilt of your chin, the soft arch of your painted eyebrows. You hear one say at a gathering, "It's very Eastern Queen this season," while pointing at a golden shawl. Another compliments your sandals, not realizing they're patterned after your childhood priestess slippers. You're fashionable now. A trend. One of the housemaids proudly tells you she's naming her daughter after the mural lady. You nod, because what else can you do? The girl will grow up hearing stories of the gentle queen who soothed lions and taught Rome to love incense and quiet wisdom. She'll never know that the woman in the picture once screamed in a battlefield fog, barefoot and bloodied, teeth bared against men in polished helmets. There's a quirky detail that scholars still debate about ancient Roman depictions of Eastern women, specifically queens. In art, they often appear seated or reclining, always composed, always still, never in motion, never shouting. It was a visual strategy. Make the foreign feminine, make the feminine passive. It turns queens into furniture. But the contradiction runs deeper, because while your image is everywhere, your voice is still nowhere. The scrolls they distribute, the poems they recite, the histories they write, none of them include your words. They describe you, but you never speak. You've become a ghost in your own legend. And yet, you're still here, still breathing, still aware. So you begin to twist the game, subtly, carefully. You suggest symbols for the artists, quietly approve inscriptions. You ask that a phrase be carved into the base of a statue in a public garden. Peace is not the absence of memory. No one questions it. It sounds noble, safe, but you know what it really means. It's your way of planting something dangerous inside their marble. You meet with scribes under the guise of sharing Eastern folk tales. You dictate stories full of veiled resistance, clever queens who fake their deaths, women who rule in secret, spies hidden in silk. They lap it up, of course. Exotic tales from the defeated East. They don't realize they're reading code. You're not the only one. You begin to spot others in the art. Quiet nods. A queen of Nubia rendered with a scar above her eye. A symbol her people once used for divine insight. A Sarmatian warrior queen with her sword lowered but her foot on the back of a wolf. Someone's been slipping subversion into the stone. You're not alone. Rome thinks it owns your image now, but every time they copy it, they spread something you've chosen. Something not theirs. Your husband doesn't notice. He's busy hosting senators and dreaming of a legacy. He commissions another statue of you, this one even taller. It's placed by the eastern gate of the estate, meant to greet guests with serenity. You stand beside it during a harvest festival, smiling for the guests, nodding like the proper Roman lady they all believe you are. And inside you think, you don't even know what you've built, do you? You're not a ghost in the machine. You are the machine now, and your image, wrong, distorted, abused, is also your weapon. Because long after you're gone, long after your bones are dust beneath foreign roots, your face will still be there. Painted on walls, chiselled into stone, echoing through the marble halls of a city that thought it could forget you. They write a play about you. You find out by accident as usual. One of the house servants brings news from the city, casually, like gossip, while refilling your wine. They've been performing a new tragedy in the Forum Theatre about the Eastern Queen, she says. Very dramatic, everyone dies. Then she laughs, unaware of what she's just handed you. You wait until nightfall, then send a message to your husband's steward in Rome, asking for a copy of the script. No explanation. Just a simple request, written in your neat Roman hand. 3 days later, the scroll arrives tucked between receipts for olive oil and papyrus. You lock your door before you unroll it. The play is called The Moon and the Lion. A heavy title. Predictable. You brace yourself. And then, there it is. It opens with a queen in mourning. She walks barefoot through the ruins of her city, ashes in her hair, robes torn in elegant ways. She speaks in poetry. Every line is a monologue about fate, regret, or misplaced pride. She has no name, just the queen, her enemy, a noble Roman general who naturally falls in love with her. She resists at first. She curses the gods. But by the second act she begins to soften. He sees her pain. She sees his honour. There's a scene in which they sit beneath a fig tree and recite Virgil. Eventually she surrenders, Not just politically, but romantically. They're married. There is a feast. And then, of course, she dies. Not in childbirth or war. No, she poisons herself. A final act of self-sacrifice to save her people from a rebellion she didn't mean to inspire. Her last words are, "Better a statue than a sword." The crowd weeps. Curtain falls. You reread it 3 times, each time feeling the acid rise higher in your throat. This is what they've made of you. A tragic lover. A noble loser. A graceful warning. Someone to cry for and then imitate at a costume party. Not a queen. Not a rebel. Just a lesson. You want to laugh. You want to scream. Instead, you walk to the mirror and study yourself. They've made you into fiction. Now you'll make fiction into fire. There's an old trick from your childhood, used by travelling storytellers, those clever women who move between villages pretending to be dream interpreters or herbalists. They'd hide truths inside the shapes of tales, disguising facts as riddles. You remember one, especially. A story about a queen who turned herself into a falcon to escape capture, but left her shadow behind to keep watch. The audience always loved that one, never understood what it meant. You write your own version now. In your new public writings, those commissioned by your husband or requested by well-meaning Roman women, you begin to slide in characters. A queen of no country, a lion with a voice, a general with honey in his words and blood in his hands. These are just stories, of course, just harmless little fables. The sort that keep dinner guests entertained and polite wives feeling sophisticated. But some will read deeper. You hope. You learn that the actor playing the Queen in the Moon and the Lion is a former slave, now a rising star in the city. Her name is Livia Minor. She performs the role with such grace that Roman girls have begun copying her walk. You send her a gift, a gold bangle in the shape of a coiled snake. You don't send a note. She'll understand or she won't, and the play keeps spreading. They stage it in seaside towns, then in Gaul, then farther. Everywhere Rome has planted a theatre and a senator's son with too much time. The lines get misquoted, the costumes get brighter. Eventually there's a new ending. In one version, the queen marries the general and lives. In another, she betrays him and is executed to thunderous applause. And so it begins. The disassembly of your story into fragments, some tragic, some comic, all false. But that's not what haunts you. What haunts you is that these versions might outlive the truth. There's a debate among modern historians, scholarly, dusty and academic, that questions how much of history was actually shaped by theatre. Some claim Roman plays were mere entertainment, not influential. Others argue that the stage was Rome's most potent weapon, not swords, not laws, but stories. That when Rome wanted to kill a legacy, it didn't burn the records, it rewrote them, recast the villain, adjusted the lighting. You now live in a world where your story is being retold nightly to applause, where your image is divided between statues and scripts, your real voice replaced with poetic sighs. You once said a queen is not a woman with power, but a woman with memory. So you begin hoarding it. You gather letters, fragments, oral accounts from travellers. You bribe scholars to bring you censored maps. You learn who still speaks your tongue, and who only pretends. You start building a counter-history, layered and hidden, buried within the folds of fiction. A secret library of you. Not the marble you, not the barefoot queen walking toward her romantic death, but the one who watched the smoke rise over her city and planned 1,000 tiny revenges. The you that never died. Because you know this much. They can't kill what they can't find. So you let the stories spread. Let them perform you into oblivion. Meanwhile, you keep writing. You write a version of The Moon and the Lion that ends differently. A third act where the queen does not fall in love. Where she does not die. Where she disappears into the woods, builds an army and teaches girls how to gut a man with a single look. You don't publish it. You leave it in a jar buried under the statue of Pax Orientalis. Maybe someone will find it, maybe they won't. But either way, you've placed the match. Let the fiction burn. It always comes back to the East. No matter how far you push yourself into the folds of Roman life, into its villas, its language, its pale cuisine, and its endlessly grinning statues, you cannot escape the gravitational pull of where you came from. And what's worse, neither can they. Rome is obsessed with the East, not just for its silks, spices and perfumes, but for its queens, its women, its stories. The further east you go in Rome's imagination, the more exotic and dangerous you become. They've created an entire aesthetic around it. You start seeing it everywhere now. In fashion, women drape themselves in gauzy fabrics, wear gold circlets across their brows, and paint their eyes into exaggerated lines. They call it Eastern glamour. A senator's daughter wears sandals with bells on the straps and says it makes her feel like a desert princess. You want to laugh, or maybe scream. She's never seen a desert. She's never heard silence so wide it feels like God breathing. She's never buried her father with dirt so hot it sizzled under her fingernails. To them, the East is fantasy, and you, whether you like it or not, are now part of it. At a banquet, a young nobleman, barely old enough to grow a beard, leans in close and asks if it's true that Eastern queens sleep on beds of rose petals and bathe in milk. You stare at him for a long moment and say, "No, we bathe in blood and the tears of fools." He laughs, assuming it's a joke. You do not smile. You begin to realise that Rome doesn't fear you as a person anymore. They've defanged you. What they fear is the idea of you. The potential that another queen, from another eastern land, could rise and burn their world to ash. So they try to control that fear by turning it into art, into fantasy. They wrap you in veils and keep you in gardens, hoping the mystery will replace the memory of the sword. There's a long-standing pattern in Roman culture of painting Eastern women as seductresses, mystics, or monsters. Rarely anything in between. Cleopatra is still the standard, equal parts siren and sinner. They can't seem to talk about her without mentioning how she dressed or whom she seduced. Zenobia, too, is reduced now to a cautionary tale, brilliant, beautiful, but arrogant. They say she reached too far, that she forgot her place. You can feel the edge of that warning in how they talk about you. You overhear one man call you dangerous in the way only the East can be, beautiful, unknowable, too clever for peace. As if intelligence is a threat, as if existing is a seduction. There's a fringe theory you once read in a smuggled scroll, that Rome's obsession with Eastern queens was more than cultural. It was psychological. That deep down, the empire couldn't quite stand the idea that women beyond its borders ruled with autonomy. That they built dynasties and led armies and wielded gods older than Jupiter. And that's why, when Rome conquered them, it didn't just kill them. It remade them into myths, into mirrors, into masks. You start cataloguing the transformations. A statue of Atossa, Queen of Persia, found in a Roman port, redone with softer features and Roman curls. A play about Semiramis, where she's a temptress who poisons her lovers. An imported tapestry of Queen Tamiris, head of Cyrus the Great held high, rewoven to show her weeping at the edge of the battlefield. Everywhere you look, there are women like you who once ruled fire and are now reduced to flickering candles in Rome's grand hall of storytelling. But here's what they miss. Myths don't die. They mutate. They leak through the cracks of marble. They whisper from the mouths of storytellers who get the details wrong but keep the names alive. They reappear in markets painted on veils, retold around fires, smuggled inside lullabies. And the more Rome tries to own the East, the more the East infiltrates Rome. You see it in the temples now, more and more shrines to Isis, to Cybele, to Anahita. Women kneeling before goddesses not born in Italy. You see it in the marketplaces where perfumed oil from your homeland is more valuable than gold. You see it in the bathhouses where Roman women trade recipes for your people's spice blends and argue about which colour of silk is most authentic. They want you out, and yet they want to be you. It's a strange kind of power. Perverse, yes, but power nonetheless. And you begin to use it. You host small salons at the villa, quiet gatherings, mostly women. You discuss poems, herbs, fashion on the surface. But underneath, you talk about identity, about what it means to be seen only through the lens of someone else's story. You talk about how to steal it back. You never say it outright, too risky. But the women know. The smart ones always do. You start wearing your old colours again, subtly at first. A border of lapis on your robe, a sash dyed with saffron and pomegranate, a ring with your family's crest carved into the underside. You begin to speak your own language when no one is listening. You teach the servants how to pronounce your name correctly. You write prayers to gods Rome pretends not to believe in, and burn them at night in small clay bowls. It's not rebellion. Not exactly. It's remembrance. And remembrance to an empire built on amnesia is its own kind of war. You're no longer their queen, not in the records, not in the law, but you are still the East, and they can't stop looking. It hits you one afternoon while walking the edge of the orchard how little of this was ever about you. Not really. Not your choices, not your armies, not your gods. Rome never cared who you were, only what you meant. Your fall was a press release. Your survival, a branding decision. Your silence, a bullet point in someone's speech to the Senate. You've become propaganda. The word doesn't exist yet in Latin, not exactly, but the machinery is already running. You see it in the murals, in the mosaics, in the cleaned-up scrolls of your story passed between scholars like warm gossip. You hear it in the way soldiers speak of you in passing, not as a person, but as a moment. The Queen of the South, the Eastern Rose, the one who bent the knee. You didn't. That's the part they rewrote. You were dragged, bloodied, spitting curses in your own tongue. But that's not a neat ending, so they gave you one. You're now a symbol, and a useful one at that. Rome likes to talk about itself as eternal, ordered, favoured by the gods. But underneath the polished marble and bronze statuary is a deep, humming fear. Fear of revolt, fear of instability, fear that somewhere, someone still believes they have a better claim to power, and so they prop you up, not to inspire, but to warn. Look, they say, at what happens when a queen rises too high. Look at what Rome allows to live. They use you the way they use monuments, to remind the restless that the empire has a long memory and longer chains. There's a new statue in the city. You haven't seen it, but word reaches you. It's not just you anymore, it's a trio. You, Zenobia, Cleopatra. 3 conquered queens posed like fates. One holds a scroll, one a torch, one a broken sword. The inscription reads, "They ruled, they fell, Rome endures." You stare at the message for a long time after hearing it. It's not subtle. It's not even clever. But it works. The statue becomes a favourite spot for newly married couples, for artists looking for inspiration, for orators practising how to praise the Republic while hinting at its divine mercy. They use your image to sell patience, humility, subservience. And here's the worst part. They believe it. There's a fringe academic theory that's emerged in certain Roman circles, one that discusses the utility of defeated queens. It argues that powerful women from the provinces serve a vital role in the Roman psyche. They represent passion tempered by logic, emotion disciplined by law. In simpler terms, you make Rome feel righteous. Your existence validates theirs. They conquered you, and now they parade your story as proof that they should have. But you're not the only one being used. You hear through your scattered correspondence that other royal women are being encouraged, coerced, into performing similar roles. A queen from Armenia is now consulting on trade routes. A princess of the Red Sea coast is being paraded as a living ornament in Alexandria. Her only job to wear jewels and wave from balconies. One Cappadocian noblewoman has been renamed entirely, her birth erased, her marriage to a minor Roman official called a model of East-West unity. It's a strategy. Rome domesticates power, especially female power, especially when it comes wrapped in incense and distant gods. You've started collecting these stories, quietly, an underground anthology of women Rome tried to turn into lessons. You hide them in poems, in coded prayers, in memoirs of fictional priestesses. You bind them in soft leather and bury the volumes beneath your bed. You're writing the gospel of the conquered, and in that, there's a strange satisfaction. Because if they want to use you, you'll use them right back. You start making recommendations to your husband. Small things at first. Which priests to invite, which regions to visit, which artist should decorate the new temple fresco. He listens, because he's clever enough to know you see things he doesn't. Soon people begin saying, "The senator's wife has taste. She understands harmony. She's a bridge between cultures." They're still using you, but now you're steering the ship. Your next move is bolder. You sponsor a play. Anonymously, of course. It's set in a fictional kingdom, ruled by a queen who's never named. She's clever, strategic, underestimated. The play ends not in defeat, but escape. She leaves behind a double, vanishing into myth, gathering her strength for another day. Audiences love it. They call it refreshing, subversive. There's talk of remounting it in Rome. Someone even suggests it might be based on you. You don't confirm, you don't deny, you just smile. Later you receive a letter from a young woman in Syria. She saw the play and recognized the truth. She signs it simply, Daughter of the Dust. She says she's building a school in your name, a secret one, for girls. You cry when you read it, for the first time in years. That night you walk through the vineyard as the moon rises, round and golden. You whisper the names of the women Rome tried to silence, one by one, like beads on a string. Some are real, some you've imagined. All of them are yours. They've made you into propaganda. But propaganda cuts both ways. You were supposed to be a warning, but now you're becoming something else. A manual. They call it fashion, what they're doing to your memory. They drape themselves in fabrics dyed the same red you once wore to war. They line their eyes like yours, exaggerated, elongated, meant to evoke something mysterious. They braid their hair in patterns taken straight from the royal women of your court, the same ones who were mocked for their uncivilized styles when Rome first saw them. Now it's elegant. Now it's in vogue. Now it's all the rage to look like a woman whose name they conveniently forget. At the market, a vendor sells tiny figurines labelled Domina Orientalis, the Eastern Lady. The figure looks familiar. High cheekbones, sculpted robes, one hand raised as if bestowing a blessing or issuing a command. You pick one up, turn it over. There's no maker's name, no country of origin. Just a generic stamp, approved by the Imperial Guild of Artisans. You wonder if they know who it is, or if it even matters anymore. Rome has turned you into a look. They've plucked the bones of your life and arranged them into a costume sold by the yard. You see it in every corner of the empire now. Tunics with your cut, sandals in your style, pins shaped like crescent moons. There's even a perfume. Aroma Regina, spiced with cinnamon, clove and a hint of lotus. The bottle is shaped like a tear. They say it's inspired by the last breath of the East. You sniff it once. It smells like your mother's funeral. One of your husband's relatives, young, airy, painfully fashionable, arrives for a visit dressed in what she calls tribute attire. She poses in front of your statue and asks if you'll give her tips on how to walk more like an Eastern queen. You smile thinly. Tell her to try walking with a kingdom on her back. She doesn't get it. To them it's all aesthetic, the hardship, the humiliation, the hunger. You've been made wearable. Your grief is a trend. Your crown is a hair accessory. They're not mocking you, not intentionally. That would require acknowledging that you existed. This is something worse. They've sanded you down into style. It happens to all of them, eventually. You see echoes of Zenobia in the silver-threaded belts women wear to feasts. You see Cleopatra in the milk baths that are now marketed as beauty essential. You hear whispers of Boudica every time a Roman nobleman refers to herself as fierce. Rome has a genius for commodifying what it fears. A scholar visiting from Carthage tells you, after too much wine, that this kind of trend is the highest compliment. It means you've become part of the Roman identity, he says, slicing a fig open with a silver knife. They don't fear you anymore. They admire you. You ask him what he thinks admiration feels like to the conquered. He doesn't answer. There's a debate in the philosophical circles of the city about whether cultural adoption is a form of honour or theft. Some argue that when Rome imitates, it elevates. That wearing your styles, praying to your gods, mimicking your voice is proof of your impact. Others, more cynical, claim that it's Rome's way of cannibalizing what it can't fully erase. You know which side of the argument you're on, because you remember the first time you saw Roman women stare at you like an artifact. Not a queen, not a person, just a look they could borrow. You begin collecting the fashion pieces, not to wear, to study. You lay them out in one of your private rooms. Robes, jewellery, perfumes, even cosmetics. You label each with what they used to mean. This bracelet once signified loyalty to the goddess of storms. This hair comb was used in mourning rituals. This dye was reserved for women who gave birth under eclipse. You catalogue everything Rome forgot. One afternoon, you take a walk through the nearby village. No guards, no pretense. You wear a simple cloak, your hair braided tightly beneath a scarf. At a stall, you see a little girl trying on earrings shaped like the sigil of your house. She doesn't know it, of course. The vendor tells her it's the symbol of the Moon Maiden. You almost correct him. Almost. Instead, you buy the last pair and leave a silver coin that bears the Emperor's face. That night, you remove the coin's edge with a blade. Carefully, slowly, until the face is just a blur. You keep it in a box beside your bed, not as a trophy, as a warning. Because this is what they do. They turn you into fashion, then forget where the pattern came from. And once they've squeezed all the colour from your name, they move on. But you're not done yet. You begin to teach again. Quietly. You find young women who still know how to listen with more than their ears. You teach them the real meanings, what each pattern meant, why the silk was wrapped a certain way, how scent could be used as a weapon, and bracelets could send messages, and veil colours were a kind of war cry. You remind them that before these things were pretty, they were powerful. Rome doesn't see it. It never sees it. But you're not fashion. You're armour disguised as beauty, and that they'll never be able to replicate. They start calling you Mater, not as in mother of children. Your son, still somewhere in Rome, no longer writes. His last letter was formal, respectful, addressed to you by your Roman name. It might as well have been addressed to a stranger. No, this is a different kind of mater. They mean it in the civic sense. Mater villae, mater concili, mater decorum, mother of the household, mother of wisdom, mother of Rome in miniature. You're still not Roman, not really. But now you're motherly, which is almost better. It's palatable, comforting, useful. A foreign queen rebranded not as a threat, not as an ornament, but as a caretaker of Rome's sensibilities, of its fashion, of its femininity. You've survived conquest, remade yourself, and now they want to wrap you in soft language like gauze, like a bandage on a scar they hope won't show. It's almost impressive, the way they've evolved your image. You started as a prisoner, then a curiosity, then a whisper, then a style. Now you're advice. Young wives come to you with their troubles. They ask how to host better, how to walk with dignity, how to quiet a husband's temper without raising their voice. They want to know what kind of incense you burn, what kind of wine makes a man kinder, what kind of prayer convinces the gods to bless a womb. You give them the truth, but only in pieces. You tell them rose water for calm, jasmine oil for strength, a braid wrapped right over left to ward off betrayal. You mix old rites with new logic, slip your mother's wisdom in under a Roman gloss. They think it's exotic, charming. You let them. You smile as they imitate you. Because what they don't know is that you're still shaping them, just not with armies. There's a Roman girl named Flavia who visits often. Too often. She's bright, curious, always scribbling things in her little wax tablet. She wants to learn about your old court. The dances, the rituals, the food. You indulge her, up to a point. She asks if she can write a history of your people from your perspective. You raise an eyebrow and ask, would they read it? She shrugs. They might. If I call it my evenings with the Queen. You laugh, not unkindly. You remember being her age, full of plans, full of questions. But here's the quiet truth. You've become valuable again. Not because of who you are, but because of how you appear. To the Romans, there's something elegant about an aged queen who's survived. They think your story has softened. They think your fire has gone out. And in that misjudgment, they begin to let you into rooms you were once locked out of. Rooms where real decisions are made. It starts small. Your husband asks your opinion more often. He mentions your name in letters to colleagues. My wife believes the Eastern markets may shift soon, or the Lady Julia has observed unrest among the traders. You speak sparingly at feasts, and when you do, people listen. Your words are quoted, repeated, embellished. You become known as someone who understands the subtler aspects of diplomacy. A queen-turned-counsellor. And still, you write. Not openly, but consistently. You write fables, dialogues, scripts for imaginary plays. You hide real advice in the mouths of fictional characters. You seed your strategies in the mouths of wise old women and clever slaves and wandering priestesses. You build a world inside these scrolls where power wears 100 veils, and you name each one after a part of your lost kingdom. There's a quiet theory, whispered among the servant class and lower scribes, that the Lady Julia, or whatever her name once was, has the ear of the gods, that she sees further than she speaks. Some call you Sibylla, others call you the Silver Fox. You hear the names, you let them grow. Meanwhile, you pay attention to trade routes, to food shortages, to the prices of tin and grain. You know when a province is likely to boil over before the governors do. You begin sending anonymous predictions through trusted hands in disguised handwriting. Some are warnings, some are recommendations. Most come true. No one suspects you. Not really, because queens don't make maps anymore. Mothers do. You think often of your own mother, of how she ruled. Not with declarations, but with dinners. Not with armies, but with alliances. She once ended a border conflict with a wedding gift and a series of very carefully timed rumours. You remember how people dismissed her, until they realised everything they did was something she'd already planned. You wonder if that's where this is all leading. Not a throne, not anymore, but influence. There's a fringe record, rare, debated, of a queen in exile who became the adoptive mother of a Roman emperor, raised him in her house, taught him to speak softly but strike suddenly. He never spoke her name in public, but when he became ruler, he passed a law protecting the languages of conquered peoples. Scholars argue whether she existed. You know she did. You wonder if that's your path now, maybe not as an empress, but as something longer lasting, a mould, because empires fall, statues break, names fade, but influence lingers. It slips into the next generation, then the next. Until someday, a Roman girl paints her eyes with coal and says it's just tradition, never realising she's carrying you in her bones. That's what you are now, not a prisoner, not a queen, a seed. Word count, 1 to 1. Awaiting continue. Section 21. You hear the word again, mercy, and it stings even more now than it did when you were first dragged through the Forum in chains. Back then it was offered like a prize. Rome's mercy, magnanimous and theatrical, granted to you in exchange for everything. But now it's used in a different tone, a casual one, an afterthought. You've become the poster child for benevolent conquest, a living proof of Rome's claimed virtue, a walking reminder that, yes, this is how merciful the empire can be to its enemies. You're tired of hearing the word. They say it when they point to you at feasts. See how Rome shows mercy. Even a queen sits among us. They say it when they quote lines from plays that never existed before your capture. Little flourishes like, she drank defeat like wine and found it sweet. They say it in scrolls etched by men who never saw you fight, never heard you speak your own language, and now credit your entire survival to the grace of the state. They never mention your intelligence, or your restraint, or the 1,000 tiny decisions you made to stay alive in a place that wanted you destroyed, but didn't want to get blood on the marble. They call it mercy. You call it calculation, because what they did wasn't mercy, it was management. You were spared not out of kindness, but out of strategy. A dead queen is only useful for a week, long enough to parade, to display, to provoke a statue or a story. But a living queen, she can be used for years, as a symbol, a lesson, a whisper, a veil of respectability covering conquest. Rome's mercy is a museum, quiet, curated, full of glass walls and wrong names. You start noticing just how often the word appears in speeches. A new general thanks the gods for their mercy and victory. A senator praises the emperor's mercy in allowing local traditions to remain, after replacing half the priests and installing Roman taxes. A plaque is unveiled in the forum of a conquered city with the inscription, "Rome does not destroy, Rome redeems." You want to carve the truth into the stone beneath it. Rome does destroy, but slowly, quietly, with manners. You receive an invitation to a celebration in the capital, an anniversary of some ancient treaty between Rome and a minor kingdom long since swallowed whole. Your name is listed among the honoured guests, with a line that reads, "The Queen of the South, now a daughter of Rome." You almost tear the scroll in half, but instead, you attend. You wear a simple robe, not the ceremonial kind, nothing gold, nothing exotic, just pale wool. Your hair is pinned Roman style, your jewellery is modest. You look like what they've always wanted, a woman who's been civilized. At the banquet, they seat you beside a visiting dignitary from the Far East. His eyes linger on you longer than necessary, not with desire, with recognition. He sees past the robe, past the gentle posture. You nod, just once. He nods back. It's the only honest moment of the entire night. They raise toasts to peace, to victory, to mercy. You raise your cup, sip, and wonder what they would have done if the roles were reversed. If Roman cities had been burned, their temples gutted, their gods renamed, their sons sent to distant lands to be taught foreign virtues. If a Roman queen had been marched in chains, renamed, and made into a fashion icon for the same people who burned her kingdom, would they still call it mercy? There's an open debate among scholars, still is, about whether Rome truly believed its own rhetoric. Some argue it was all a front, a convenient costume for conquest. Others insist the empire genuinely saw itself as the world's civilizer, that it thought it was saving the people it conquered. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Empires are good at lying to others, but even better at lying to themselves. You walk the edges of this lie every day. You hear whispers now, of rebellions simmering in provinces that were declared pacified decades ago. You read between the lines of shipping manifests and grain reports. You see shortages where there should be plenty, silence where there should be noise, and you know, the mercy is cracking. Rome is stretched too thin, too many mouths to feed, too many names to remember, too many queens like you who were never really tamed, just temporarily quiet. You still receive visitors, young women mostly, students, thinkers, daughters of governors. They ask for stories, you give them recipes, you give them old names, old customs, hidden in metaphor and myth. They think you're being poetic. You're not. You're planting weapons. One day you write the word mercy on a scrap of papyrus. You study it. You think about what it has cost you, what it has become. Then you burn it. And the next time someone says it to you, softly, with admiration, with a smile, you nod and think, I'll show you what mercy really means. You wake before the sun most days now. It's a habit left over from when your palace still stood, when you rose to greet the day with incense and calculation. Back then, every morning was war, negotiations with ministers, offerings to temperamental gods, letters dispatched in secret to buy loyalty from the people who pretended to serve you. Now your mornings are quieter, but not still. They think you're retired. It's an easy mistake to make. You live in the countryside. You smile more than you used to. You tend a garden with your own hands. Lavender, mint, rosemary, and bitter oranges that only ripen in late summer. You walk the vineyards slowly, asking about rainfall, root rot, and rumours. You sip herbal tea in shaded alcoves and read scrolls that come to you folded 3 times, sealed not with wax but with thread, unofficial messages, updates, stories carried by merchants who've learned not to look too closely. And they arrive more often now. Whispers of cities on edge, governors replaced with increasing frequency, local gods suddenly demanding more sacrifices, bandits who aren't bandits. You recognise the shape of it. It's the same storm you once rode in on. Rome is trying to cover the cracks with marble again, but you know the smell of instability when it rises through the floor. You get word that a new empress has taken to quoting you. Well, not you, not exactly. She recites lines from one of the fables you wrote in disguise, the one about the lion and the silk bird. You smile, faintly. She doesn't know where the story comes from, but it's already shaping her court, softening her threats with metaphor. It's already working. You never needed to wear the crown again. You just needed to be remembered. Quietly, like a hum under the Empire's hymn. You walk through the villa and see the signs of your influence stamped everywhere, subtle and spreading. The cook uses your spice blends now, though he calls them Mediterranean fusion. The gardener trims the hedges in shapes inspired by the floral symbols from your old kingdom's royal seal. The children of servants name their goats and dogs after gods you grew up fearing. Even your husband, old now, soft and content, quotes your sayings in the Senate like they're Roman proverbs. They don't even realise. You sit at your window and watch a hawk circle the orchard. You think of your mother, your grandmother, and the women before them. You think of their thrones, made of wood and fire and stubborn memory. They didn't get statues. They didn't get scrolls. They got stories passed in secret by midwives and shepherds. You're doing the same thing now, but in silk. You wonder what it means to win. You used to think it meant outlasting them. Rome, the men who killed your people, the systems that remade your name. But now you think it means outliving their version of you. You don't want their statues. You want your words in mouths that don't even know they came from you. There's an open question among historians, later, long after you've gone, about whether the Eastern Queen ever led a covert resistance. There are theories, essays, whispered lectures in underground libraries. Some claim she was an informant for the Empire. Others argue she was the spider in the web, manipulating governors and trade routes under the veil of civility. And a small, defiant group insists she was simply a woman who survived with too much dignity. They all miss the point. You weren't resistance. You were revision. You were the edit made in the margins of their glorious conquest. The queen who turned captivity into curriculum, who made herself required reading for anyone who wanted to understand power beneath the surface. You still get letters, some from girls, some from old soldiers, some from women married into Roman families who whisper your name like a prayer between sips of wine. Most don't even know if you're still alive. They write to the myth. You answer a few, but not in your own hand. You let the legend grow, let your replies feel uncertain in origin. A line here, a riddle there. Sometimes just a pressed flower, carefully chosen. You're not interested in credit. You're interested in continuity. Your villa is quiet but not empty. There's a boy who plays a lyre under your fig tree, your husband's grandnephew. Too clever, too restless, always watching. You think he might become dangerous one day. Good. You leave books where he can find them. Not the famous ones, the hidden ones. The ones about queens who didn't just survive but sculpted empires from other people's ruins. You start to think of death. Not with fear, just curiosity. How they'll tell the story. Will they say you died quietly, draped in Roman silk, whispering Latin prayers? Will they say you converted to their gods? Will they say you repented, found peace, left behind no children, no legacy? You think of leaving one final scroll, just one, unmarked, undeniably yours, the truth. But you don't, because you don't need the last word. You are the last word. And Rome? Rome is already singing your hymns, painting your myths on their ceilings, praying to gods they stole from your cradle. The Empire thinks it absorbed you, but what you've done is far more dangerous. You colonize their memory. The letter arrives without a seal, just a folded piece of parchment slipped into a basket of figs from the southern coast. The script is neat but cautious, slanted slightly right like someone writing fast and careful at once. You open it under the lemon tree, as a breeze rolls through the courtyard and the stone tiles sweat faintly with late morning heat. It's not addressed to you by name. It starts simply, to the one they turned into silence. You know immediately it's real. Not theatre, not politics, not a scholar fishing for favour or some idle aristocrat quoting back your own disguised words to you. This is from someone who remembers you as you were, or who remembers someone like you, someone who bore the same wounds, wore the same crown for too short a time. The writer is a woman. She doesn't name her province, only says she speaks the old tongue and remembers a mother who told stories of the queen who refused to vanish. She writes of secret gatherings, not rebels, not yet, but women who read your riddles by candlelight, who use your fables as instruction, who memorize your metaphors like they're maps. She ends with a question. Are you still with us? You don't answer. Not directly. You don't send anything back. Not even a flower pressed between pages. But you write something that night. Something careful. A new fable. About a woman turned into a statue who teaches crows to whisper her thoughts into the ears of sleeping children. You have it copied 4 times, buried in bundles of export scrolls headed to various markets. One will reach her. One always does. You're not leading a rebellion. That would be too obvious, too clean. Rome is always ready to crush an uprising, but it doesn't know what to do with a drip. That's what you are now, drip by drip, erosion under the marble, quiet pressure, soft words with sharp teeth. You think often now of what's next. You're old by their standards. Still sharp, still graceful, but your joints ache in the mornings and your vision blurs when the sun's too bright. You don't fear death. Not because you're ready, but because you've outlived what was supposed to kill you. You weren't meant to make it past the parade, past the exile, past the soft forgetting. And yet here you are. Every time Rome looks in the mirror, it sees your face in the outline. Your husband dies in the spring. It's not unexpected. He was gentle in his decline, too polite to cause trouble. You mourn him sincerely. He was never cruel, never tried to possess what he didn't understand. In some ways, you think he loved you, at least the version of you Rome taught him to love. And maybe that's the closest thing to peace you'll ever get. He leaves the villa to you, fully. No contest, no interference from his relatives. They likely think it's a mercy, letting the aged foreign wife live out her final years among vines and art. But you know what it really is? It's freedom. For the first time since your capture, you are legally the ruler of something again. Small, quiet, but yours. You change nothing at first, not visibly. The same olive press runs, the same staff remains. You speak softly, but you begin writing more. You ask the steward to hire tutors for the local girls. Not formal ones, just old women, retired scribes, a few clever midwives who know how to speak without being overheard. You say it's education. Rome approves. You know it's recovery. A senator's wife visits. She talks about the worsening situation in the provinces, how temples are being vandalized, how grain shipments are delayed, how the roads aren't as safe as they used to be. She wrings her hands and calls it instability. You call it restlessness. She asks your advice. You tell her, when an empire swells too far, it forgets the edges. The edges do not forget. She blinks, unsure if it's a threat or a proverb. You let her wonder. You plant more herbs, the kind used in rituals long banned, the kind only a handful of women still know how to prepare. You plant them in plain sight, call them decorative, aromatic, seasonal. You know their real names, what they were once mixed with, what kind of magic they used to fuel. Magic, of course, is illegal. But so is telling the truth some days. You find your name in a scroll, casually mentioned, almost forgotten. A line in a long list of foreign wives of Rome, positioned between a Gaulish princess and a Dacian noblewoman who died unnamed. They call you Julia Regina Orientalis. That name again, not yours, just the one they gave you. You press your hand to the page until the ink smudges, and you write in the margins, she lives. There's a strange theory you heard once, that memory isn't linear, that it spirals, loops, that every time someone speaks a name with true intent, the past blinks open for just a moment, and in that blink, the forgotten can breathe again. You begin to teach the servants' children a new lullaby, one of your old songs, just a melody, no words, not yet. It catches, as songs do. A girl sings it while hanging laundry. A boy hums it while feeding chickens. Soon it's drifting through the vineyards, soft and almost holy. They think it's new. It's older than Rome. One night as you lie awake, you wonder if you've become a ghost. Not the haunting kind, the echo kind. The sort that lingers behind the smile of a senator's daughter or the boldness of a merchant's wife who dares to speak when she's not spoken to. Maybe that's what survival really is, not breathing, but echoing. And if Rome can echo through stone and sword and law, then so can you. You dream in your own language now, not the careful Latin you've perfected over the years, not the phrases you've polished like silver to make your Roman companions nod and say, how refined she's become. No, in sleep, your tongue forgets diplomacy. You speak the old words, the ones that taste like honey and smoke, like hot stone and thunder. The language of your mother, your nursemaid, your gods. In your dreams, no one renames you. You walk through a palace that no longer stands, hear your name shouted in celebration, see banners in your colours, not copies, not fashionable reimaginings, but real cloth dyed with real blood and berries, stitched by hands that meant every thread. There's no marble, no Latin inscriptions, just sand, silk, steel, and you wake up aching, not with sadness, with something deeper, something molten. You know now, clearer than ever, that Rome never killed your kingdom. It just buried it under stories, and every day it tries to keep it buried. But stories are never as quiet as they seem. There's a festival in the capital, a celebration of victory. 10 years since the final. Revolt in the East was pacified. You receive an invitation, a high honour, they say, a token of Rome's respect. They want you to sit beside the new empress, to watch dancers reenact a stylized version of your people's surrender. You decline. Politely. You send a gift instead, a jar of soil from your orchard sealed with wax. No message, no explanation, just dirt. It's enough. She'll understand. She's not a fool, that one. Not yet, anyway. You wonder how long before she too is reshaped, refined into myth, quoted but never heard. You've taken to wearing your old clothes in private, not the originals, those were burned or stolen long ago, but recreations, cloth you've dyed yourself, patterns you've stitched by hand, fingers slower now but still steady. You wear them in your study, in your garden, sometimes on walks through the vineyard when the sun is low and no one is watching. The feel of them is a balm. Your body remembers. You speak to your gods again, not the Roman ones, not the marble-faced parasites installed in every city. Yours, the old gods. You don't ask them for favours. You don't ask for vengeance. You just remind them you're still here. They haven't answered, but they haven't left. You've become legend now, officially. Your name appears in children's scrolls, not as a villain, not anymore, as a figure of transition, a woman who bridged east and west. A phrase that sounds noble and says nothing. They call you the Mother of Harmony, the Queen between eras, the peaceful Lady of Two Worlds. They never mention the blood, or the hunger, or the sound of your language being ripped from a screaming priest's throat. A historian writes to you hoping for an interview. He wants to document your experience for future generations. He promises neutrality. You smile and throw the letter in the fire, not because you're angry, because you don't trust his neutrality to carry your weight. You've started writing your own version, not an autobiography. You'd never hand them something so easy to edit. No, you write it as a novel, an allegory, a queen of a vanished kingdom taken in chains to a golden city. She lives, she learns, she becomes someone else. But every night she spits into the fire and whispers her real name. It's full of lies, of course, but the truths are deeper. You write one copy, just one. You bury it beneath the lemon tree, the one that leans east toward the sea. Let them wonder. Let them dig. Let them argue centuries from now if it's fact or fiction. Let them guess. There's an idea among some philosophers that time moves in spirals, that the same stories repeat themselves over and over, wearing new masks. A kingdom rises, a queen resists, the empire wins, the queen is renamed, the queen becomes myth. And somewhere, a girl finds the myth and starts asking questions. You're no longer trying to stop the spiral. You're feeding it. You receive another letter. This one anonymous. Simple. We remember you. Just that. No name, no wax seal. But the handwriting. Yes, you know it. The girl from long ago. The one who asked to write your biography. The one who wore your perfume and thought being like you meant wearing your bracelets. She's grown. You smile. The myths are working. You wonder how many there are now. Women like her carrying fragments of your voice in their blood. Some knowingly, some not. Some marching. Some married off, sharpening daggers in their dowry chests. Some singing your lullabies in languages they were never taught. Some just standing too straight at banquets, making senators shift in their seats. They don't need to rise in unison. They just need to exist. Because Rome can survive battles. It can survive revolts and invasions and the occasional mad emperor. But it cannot survive remembering you correctly. Not all of you. Not the woman who loved her gods. Not the woman who ruled. Not the woman who broke her chains by wearing them until they rusted. So you keep writing, and weaving, and whispering old names into olive trees when no one is looking. You walk your orchard like it's sacred ground. Because it is. This is your temple now. And you? You're not waiting for worship. You're waiting for the next queen. The night it happens, the sky is cloudless, sharp stars etched into black glass, and the sea, though distant, carries its salt on the wind. You're sitting in the same chair you always do, under the arbour heavy with grapes not yet ripe, listening to the cicadas. Their hum reminds you of drums, not the ceremonial kind, but the ones beaten in darkness during rituals that no longer have names in any surviving language. You wonder if the gods still hear them, or if even the gods have forgotten how this began. A servant appears, breathless, a scroll in his hands. He's pale under the eyes and blinking too much. You already know what it is before he says a word. You take the scroll, open it slowly, as if its weight can be delayed. The wax is imperial, red, with a seal that hasn't touched your name in years. You scan the first few lines and then sit very still. The Emperor is dead. Poison, they think. Or a fever disguised as something else. Rome is already tearing at its own skin. Succession unclear. Rumours sprouting like mould. One general has declared himself interim ruler. A senator has gone into hiding. Riots in the port. Temples locked. Bread lines broken. You exhale. Slow. Not because you're joyful. Not because you wished for it. But because you knew this would come. No empire lasts forever. Not even the ones that carve their gods into stone. In the days that follow, the news unravels like a tapestry pulled from the wall. The capital is in chaos. Governors are choosing sides. Some of the outer provinces are already declaring autonomy. The roads you used to travel in chains are now dotted with burned-out posts and looted wagons. Everyone is deciding who they want to be now that the stage is collapsing. And just like that, you're powerful again. Not officially, not legally, but truly. Because suddenly, people start remembering that you're still here. Messengers arrive, quiet ones, softly dressed, asking nothing outright, just how you're feeling or what wisdom you might offer in uncertain times. A woman who once laughed at your fables now recites them to her children like scripture. A minor noble whose family once called you the conquered queen now writes you as Mater Sapientia, mother of wisdom, and begs your guidance. You write carefully, nothing direct, nothing treasonous, just stories. Stories with choices, stories with consequences, stories that don't end the way Rome would have liked. There's a knock at your door one evening. A young man, barely 20, sharp eyes, dirt under his nails, asks to speak to you. He calls you Domina, but his accent reveals something else. You answer in your old tongue. He doesn't flinch. He replies, fluently. You offer him wine. He declines. He says, I've come to learn how to build a kingdom. You look at his hands. You ask, are you willing to lose one first? He nods. That's when you know. It's happening. Not a rebellion. Not a new Rome. Something else. A memory. Unburied. You start to gather them. Slowly. The ones who come without banners or slogans. The ones who don't call it revolution, because they know that word is too Roman. These are seed planters. Whisper weavers. Girls with calluses and boys who don't flinch at gods that wear many faces. You do not command them. You teach them how to speak in metaphors, how to disappear in plain sight, how to take the tools of your captors and bend them just enough to fit your hands. You remind them that power doesn't always look like a throne. It can be a song, a story, a name spoken in a forbidden tongue. And still, you stay quiet. You're not trying to be queen again. You're trying to be ground. Because empires fall, but soil remains. And if you till it right, if you nourish it with truth and myth and blood and hope, something new grows, something older than Rome. In the capital, statues fall. You hear of one, your likeness, the peaceful queen, toppled by a mob and dragged through the street. They beheaded it, burned the stone crown, laughed. You smile when you hear it. Let them burn the statue. You were never in it. The real version of you is elsewhere, in the scrolls buried in children's games, in the herbs growing behind kitchens, in the way women press their hands to their chest when they lie, the way they've begun to braid their hair again with 3 loops instead of 2, like your mother taught you. You become invisible, and in that invisibility, eternal. At night, you dream again, this time not of the past, but of something else. A house made of shadow and light, a temple without a name, children running barefoot through dust and orange, blossoms, and someone singing your name, not the Roman one, the real one, the one that no longer appears in scrolls, the one only the wind remembers. You wake with tears on your cheeks, not sorrow, relief, because it started. You're no longer the woman Rome spared. You're no longer the queen they renamed. You are the question they couldn't answer. And long after their roads crack, long after their marble fades, long after the Senate becomes a story told to wide-eyed children with sticky fingers and braided hair, your story will remain, not in books, in bones, in the way people move, in the words they choose. And one day, when a new empire rises and they ask, how did it begin? Someone will whisper, there was once a queen who wouldn't disappear. You've made it. 30 chapters, 30,000 words, 30 steps into the heart of a woman whose real name they tried to erase, who became a queen, a prisoner, a mother, a ghost, a myth, and something more dangerous than any of those, a memory they couldn't quite kill. Let's be honest, no one gets a clean ending here. Not you, not Rome, not the echoes. You don't get a final battle with flaming swords. You don't ascend to some sparkling afterlife crowned in gold and redeemed by applause. Real history doesn't work like that. Sometimes you just keep living, quietly, sharpening stories instead of blades, teaching instead of screaming, building legacies out of lullabies, not monuments. And in that there's something quieter, but more powerful than victory. There's endurance. Rome thought it spared you, that it saved you by remaking you into something more palatable. But in doing so, it left the door cracked open, and through that crack your voice got out. Your stories leaked. Your truths, masked, whispered, mirrored in 10,000 little ways, rippled through time like water finding its way through stone. And maybe that's the point. The empire doesn't fall in a single night. It crumbles under the weight of forgotten names, of languages remembered in sleep, of songs hummed by girls too young to know why the melody feels holy. And there you are, in all of them. So, before you drift off tonight, remember this. Power isn't always fire and iron. Sometimes it's the refusal to disappear. Sometimes it's survival so complete that you become part of the next thing. The empire falls, you do not.